A millionaire CEO hadn't touched a woman in 5 years, until his new secretary walked in and unknowingly shattered every wall he'd built around his heart. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. A thick fog enveloped the towering glass skyscraper of Drake Enterprises that morning, as if the very city itself sensed that something extraordinary was about to happen. On the top floor, within those polished corridors of power, an unusual tension crackled in the air. No one could explain why the staff whispered more quietly than usual, or why the usually bustling offices felt so charged. Perhaps it was the rumors swirling around their elusive boss, the eccentric and powerful millionaire CEO who had chosen solitude for 5 long years. Alexander Drake was a legend not only for his financial empire but also for his mysterious withdrawal from society. Decorum demanded that employees not pry into his personal affairs, yet one could not help but overhear the whispered speculations, "He hasn't dated in half a decade," or "He rarely sees visitors, especially women." The more the staff murmured, the more mythical he became. Tales abounded. Some said heartbreak had driven him to close off his heart. Others believed darker secrets were at play. But one thing was undeniably true. Alexander Drake had severed all intimate connections with women for reasons known only to him. On that Monday morning, the entire building felt the tremor of a change. After so many years, Mr. Drake had posted a vacancy for a new personal secretary. Resumes had flooded the HR department, drawn by the tantalizing rumor of an extravagant salary and the prestige of working under a CEO whose name commanded reverence throughout the business world. Yet from that towering stack of applications, only one name emerged: Elena Turner. When Elena stepped through the revolving doors of Drake Enterprises for the first time, her heart pounded hard enough to echo in her ears. She wasn't just starting a new job. She was about to enter the world of a man rumored to be as formidable as he was reserved. She pressed the elevator button for the top floor, her mind racing with all she had heard and read about him. He was known for his brilliance in forging alliances and making merciless decisions to protect his empire. He was unstoppable in the boardroom, but behind that perfect facade, something in her gut whispered that there was more to Alexander Drake than just his cautionary distance from the entire female population. While the elevator ascended, Elena stole a glimpse of her own reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked calm enough, a professional ensemble carefully chosen to convey competence without flamboyance. Her olive blazer, neatly paired with a pale blouse, signaled seriousness. The only sign of her nerves was the barely perceptible tremor in her hands, which she quickly hid by clutching her notepad tighter. This was an opportunity she desperately needed. Under normal circumstances, working for such a high-profile CEO would have been daunting. But after the sudden financial crisis that had rocked her family, Elena could not afford to let any lingering doubts hinder her. She needed this job. She needed the stability it promised. The elevator chimed on the top floor, revealing an immaculate reception area. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, where dawn light spilled over skyscrapers in shimmering ribbons. A discreet sign read, "Executive Suite, authorized personnel only." She stepped out, spotting a small modern desk belonging to Danielle, Mr. Drake's head of administrative coordination. Danielle was the gatekeeper, so to speak. She stood, greeted Elena with a courteous but firm nod, then motioned for her to follow. As they walked through the labyrinthine hallway, Elena couldn't stop noticing the hush, a hush so profound that she almost felt she was trespassing in a sacred temple. Rare paintings lined the walls, impressionist watercolors from Europe, abstract landscapes from Asia. All were carefully illuminated by discreet lighting. At the far end of the corridor, they reached a set of tall double doors embossed with the Drake Enterprises logo. Danielle paused, exchanged a brief glance with Elena, and then quietly opened the doors. Behind an austere, wide desk, Alexander Drake rose from a leather chair. He was taller than Elena had imagined, with broad shoulders and an athletic build that gave away his old passion for competitive sports. Rumors said he once owned a professional sailing team. His presence was undeniably magnetic. Even the air seemed to shift, electrified by his aura. Yet what struck Elena most was his face. He was undeniably handsome, eyes a deep shade of gray, hair meticulously groomed, a firm jaw. But there were faint shadows under those eyes, whispering of sleepless nights. Something intangible about him radiated both power and guarded vulnerability, like a fortress on high alert. "Ms. Turner," he said, voice low and measured, "I presume HR has briefed you on your duties?" Elena swallowed. "Yes, Mr. Drake," she answered, trying to keep her tone steady. "I'm prepared to begin immediately." He studied her in silence. Rumor had it that he could read a person's intentions with a single look, a skill honed by countless high-stakes negotiations. "I appreciate punctuality," he said at last. "Follow me." Without further preamble, he led her to a smaller adjoining office. It was comfortably outfitted, a sleek desk, a state-of-the-art computer, and plush chairs. But everything had the air of disuse, as though no occupant had spent more than a fleeting moment in that space. Elena noticed, as he pointed out her new workstation, that he maintained a good 2 or 3 steps between them, as though an invisible boundary must not be crossed. His posture remained impeccable, hands clasped behind his back in a posture of unwavering authority, or perhaps one of subtle self-protection. "From now on, you'll handle my scheduling and coordinate any documents that need to be signed. Danielle will direct you for your first few days. If any issues come up," a flicker crossed his face, "address them with her first." Elena almost asked if she should approach him only as a last resort, but she bit her tongue. Instead, she nodded, scribbling hasty notes in her notepad. She wanted to appear as efficient and organized as possible. Any misstep might give him reason to dismiss her, and she couldn't afford that. Mr. Drake gave a sharp nod. "That's all." He turned away abruptly, as if the conversation itself were a form of contact he wasn't entirely comfortable with. Before she could thank him, he exited, leaving behind a hint of citrus cologne and the echo of footsteps on polished marble. Elena settled into her new desk chair, exhaling slowly. The tension in her chest was overwhelming, but she was also intrigued. Few words had been exchanged, yet she could sense the swirling undercurrent. Perhaps it was the haunting loneliness behind Mr. Drake's carefully poised mask, or the unyielding barrier he had built around himself. Either way, she felt a strange pang of empathy for the man the tabloids portrayed as an icy, unapproachable billionaire. She had no idea that from that day forward her life would become entangled with his in ways she never imagined. For beyond the mundane tasks of scheduling and handling the high-stakes deals that soared across his desk, there was something else waiting, a secret that pried at the edges of Alexander Drake's self-imposed exile, something that would soon unravel under Elena's gaze, no matter how determined he was to keep it hidden. Over the next few days, Elena struggled to settle into a routine. She arrived earlier than most of the staff to review Mr. Drake's daily agenda. Meetings with foreign investors, charity galas to sponsor, new expansions overseas. The man never stopped. And yet, in the midst of all these tasks, he remained as distant as ever, always meticulously professional, as if there was an unspoken rule to keep everything purely transactional. By day 3, Elena noticed that Mr. Drake almost never sat face-to-face with female clients or partners if he could avoid it. He always positioned them at the far end of the table or arranged phone calls instead of in-person visits. She even saw him step aside in hallways to let women pass as though the slightest physical contact were taboo. The rumor swirling in her mind was inescapable. He truly hadn't touched a woman in 5 years. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, Elena lingered to prepare a stack of documents for a critical meeting. She sat typing the final details into a contract. In the reflection of her computer screen, she suddenly noticed Mr. Drake behind her in the hallway. He was about to say something, then hesitated. Instead, he stared at the floor momentarily before clearing his throat. "You're here late," he commented, voice quieter than usual. "I wanted to finalize these proposals," Elena replied, pushing aside the pang of nervousness in her chest. "The investors in Tokyo requested a last-minute revision. I thought it best to handle it before tomorrow's meeting." He nodded, clearly appreciative. Good initiative. Once again, though, his gaze dropped. She wondered if eye contact unsettled him. "There's an important dinner meeting next Thursday. Make sure I have everything I need to attend. Address, guest list, dietary concerns. Our potential partners are quite demanding." "No problem, I'll handle it." She managed a small smile. For a heartbeat, Alexander's guarded eyes flickered with what might have been gratitude or curiosity. Then the moment passed like a gust of wind, and he excused himself with a clipped, "Thank you," pivoting sharply and walking away. Elena sank back into her chair, adrenaline pulsing. He was as aloof as ever, yet for that single moment, she sensed something else behind his meticulous reserve. In those few seconds, she glimpsed a haunting vulnerability in his eyes, as though he wrestled with his own demons behind closed doors. She wondered what a man like Alexander Drake could have possibly suffered to keep him locked in such solitude for half a decade. She wanted to dismiss these thoughts, reminding herself she was just an employee and that her personal curiosity didn't matter. Yet the more she tried, the more her intuition needled her. Something inside this man was broken, and somehow she felt an inexplicable need to help mend it. All the while, the staff watched from the periphery. Most were used to Mr. Drake's reclusive nature. Any new secretary typically lasted only a few weeks before resigning, claiming that the environment was too unsettling. As far as they saw, it was just a matter of time before Elena, too, walked away. After all, some said the aura around him was unnerving, like walking on a tightrope in a storm. But Elena was different. She had her own burdens to carry and no safety net to run to. Financial struggles weighed heavily on her family, and she couldn't simply quit to find some other job with less tension. Whether out of necessity or a deeper sense of empathy, she resolved to endure the stares and Mr. Drake's frosty demeanor. She needed to push forward, even if it meant navigating the labyrinth of secrets that lay behind those imposing office doors. What none of them realized, not even Elena herself, was that the uncharted path she was embarking upon would reveal truths far beyond a simple heartbreak or corporate secrecy. In the reflection of Drake's eyes lay a story of pain, mistakes, and regrets that had led him to erect walls not just around his heart, but around every corner of his life. And she would be the one to stumble upon that hidden corridor, where the real Alexander Drake was imprisoned by the ghosts of his past. Outside, night deepened over the city, the skyline a jigsaw of neon lights flickering in the darkness. In his private penthouse office, Alexander stared at an old photograph. He kept it in a drawer, locked away from everyone, especially from himself. The picture was of a smiling woman, radiant with laughter, leaning against him as if the future were theirs to conquer. He grimaced, shutting the drawer with a firm snap. 5 years, he reminded himself. 5 years since he'd last felt a woman's warmth or touch. He left the office under the cloak of midnight, his footsteps echoing in empty hallways. In the elevator, descending alone, he felt a strange stirring in his chest. The memory of Elena's gentle smile or the unwavering way she looked at him stayed with him. He shook his head, pushing the thought away. Nothing would change. He had sworn never again to let anyone breach the walls he'd built, but something was shifting in the corridors of Drake Enterprises and in the silent heart of Alexander Drake. In the hushed pre-dawn quiet of Drake Enterprises, Elena arrived early, much as she had every day since her start date. She had a routine: settle at her desk with a small cup of tea and carefully prepare Alexander Drake's schedule. But this morning, her nerves danced for a different reason. She had discovered last night, by a simple note left on her desk from Danielle that she would be accompanying Mr. Drake to the important business dinner next Thursday. It was unusual. Until now, any such engagement fell to a more senior staff member. This time, for reasons unknown, the CEO had decided that Elena Turner would join him as his personal coordinator. The notion made her pulse flutter with a mix of pride and foreboding. She busied herself typing an email to confirm the dinner's venue and menu choices. The client, a powerful Japanese conglomerate, insisted on the presence of the entire Drake negotiating team. Yet the invitation specifically mentioned, with a formal politeness that felt almost defensive, that no extraneous staff would be necessary. That signaled they were either high-strung or determined to keep the meeting to essential personnel. So why, Elena wondered, did Mr. Drake want her there? Footsteps made her glance up. Danielle emerged from the elevator, cradling a stack of manila folders. "Good morning," she greeted softly, though her eyes flickered with mild curiosity. "Working on the Tokyo dinner, I see." Elena nodded. "Yes, I was just about to finalize the documents for Mr. Drake. Do you happen to know why he wants me there?" She tried to sound casual, even though the question had been gnawing at her for hours. Danielle hesitated. Her expression suggested she knew more than she cared to reveal. "He must have his reasons," she said, adjusting the folders in her arms. "Just be prepared. The men flying in from Tokyo are extremely formal, and you should know Mr. Drake rarely takes a secretary along unless there's a pressing need." Elena tried to read her face, but Danielle simply gave a polite nod and carried on down the corridor. The exchange left Elena with more questions than answers. She decided to review the files for the potential Tokyo merger meticulously. The conglomerate was known for rapid expansions, investing heavily in biotech and advanced robotics. Drake Enterprises, on the other hand, specialized in global real estate, energy, and strategic shipping routes. Partnering with the Japanese firm would open entire new markets. And though Elena was no business strategist, she sensed that the deal was teetering on a fragile axis. Any misstep could cost Drake Enterprises a fortune. Possibly that pressure was why Mr. Drake wanted the dinner to run smoothly, down to the last detail. At precisely 7:30, Alexander Drake arrived. As usual, the entire top-floor staff seemed to feel his presence before they actually saw him. He walked briskly, every step radiating authority. Elena watched from her desk as he paused by Danielle to exchange a few quiet words, no doubt a routine check on the day's tasks, then advanced toward his office. Before disappearing inside, he turned slightly in Elena's direction. "Ms. Turner," he said, voice resonating across the corridor. "Please join me in my office in 5 minutes." He vanished behind the tall doors, offering no further explanation. Elena exhaled, saved her open documents, and smoothed her blouse. A swirl of conflicting emotions rose in her chest, anticipation, a flicker of dread, but also curiosity about what awaited her. She picked up her notepad and a pen before crossing to his office, giving a tentative knock. When his low "come in" echoed, she stepped inside. He was seated behind his expansive desk, flipping through a portfolio of records. The early morning light bathed the space, glinting off the glass walls that overlooked the city. She waited silently for him to acknowledge her. Finally, he set the portfolio aside and folded his hands. "I trust you've arranged Thursday evening's dinner details," he said, eyes momentarily flicking to a silver watch on his wrist. "I've decided you'll accompany me. Consider it an extension of your role. There may be documents needing immediate adjustments, and I don't want to rely on third parties or external staff." So that was it. She would be there essentially as an on-site executive assistant, ready to fix any last-minute contract or catch errors in real time. Still, the question lingered. Why her? She ventured, "Yes, Mr. Drake, I'm prepared. Danielle gave me background on the attendees. I've contacted the restaurant to confirm the menu. I'll have a portfolio of relevant documents ready." He nodded, seemingly satisfied, and paused before speaking again. There's a detail I need to mention. This particular group is conservative, extremely conservative about business etiquette. You might be asked to remain in the background unless specifically addressed. Don't take offense. It's their custom. I understand. She mustered her calm, professional voice. I'll behave in accordance with their expectations. He seemed relieved by her composure. Very well, that's all. It was a dismissal, but as Elena turned to leave, he spoke again, voice catching oddly in his throat. If there's anything you need to ensure success, let me know. She glanced over her shoulder. His gray eyes met hers, and for an instant, a flicker of something softer passed between them, a moment of unspoken gratitude or perhaps a delicate breach in the fortress he had constructed. Then it was gone. His gaze dropped again, as though he were unwilling or unable to let that moment linger. Elena returned to her desk, heart quietly drumming. She found the entire exchange different. Not exactly personal, far from it, but there was an undercurrent of mutual respect there. Or maybe, she mused, she was simply overthinking. She had a job to do, and daydreaming about the glimpses of humanity within her boss was a distraction she could ill afford. That afternoon, Elena slipped down to the staff cafeteria for a quick lunch. She picked at a salad while her mind roamed over last-minute tasks. The hush of the room was broken by casual chatter among employees, some of whom she recognized in passing. She was about to return to her desk when she overheard a pair of accountants at the next table whispering, oblivious to her presence. "And I heard that after she died he just shut down," one said with a sympathetic tone. "Never touched another woman. Never dated, not even a fling." The second accountant replied in a hushed murmur. "So that's why? Because of that accident?" Elena froze, a prickle racing along her skin. Accident. She inhaled slowly. They had to be talking about Alexander Drake. She felt guilty eavesdropping, but the details might offer a glimpse into why he was so guarded. The first accountant continued. "It's hush-hush, but apparently he blames himself. Some fiancé or lover or something of that sort." The conversation drifted on, but Elena couldn't bring herself to listen further. She stood hastily, discarding her half-eaten salad. So there had been a tragedy. Perhaps that explained his distance, the vow he made never to connect with a woman again. She hurried out of the cafeteria, her thoughts a flurry. Maybe she was naive, but the idea that heartbreak and guilt had driven him into such solitude made her chest ache in sympathy. Back at her desk, she tried to bury herself in tasks, but she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. A swirl of empathy pressed at her. She wanted to believe that beneath Alexander Drake's stern exterior lived a man bearing heavy scars. The following days passed in a blur of phone calls, scheduling rechecks and document revisions. Elena found Mr. Drake more exacting than ever. He insisted on triple-proofing every detail for Thursday's dinner. He would phone or email at odd hours, even late in the evening, questioning some small aspect of the plan. She sensed the deal carried enormous stakes, but she also wondered if his obsessive micromanagement served as a distraction from something deeper, like someone gripping tasks to avoid looking inward. By the time Thursday dawned, Elena felt mentally exhausted, but her organizational spree had paid off. She had prepared a meticulously tabbed binder containing the joint venture proposals, projected financials, contact sheets for each attendee, plus a contingency plan if last-minute changes arose. The dinner was to be held in a private suite of one of the city's most exclusive hotels, featuring a panoramic view from the top floor. The environment was to be hushed, refined, with a staff personally vetted by Drake's team. That evening, Elena donned a tailored navy dress with a modest neckline, just formal enough to complement the occasion without overshadowing it. A subtle pang of nerves fluttered in her gut as she thought about riding in the same car as Mr. Drake. Usually, each arrived separately to any meeting, or she was simply left to coordinate from the office. But here, the instructions specified they would leave from the building's private garage together, in his car. When she descended to the garage, she found Mr. Drake leaning against a sleek black sedan. He looked as impeccable as always: charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, tie in a subdued silver tone. In the faint fluorescent light of the underground structure, the shadows played across his features, giving him an even more guarded look than normal. He opened the passenger door for her, politely maintaining distance as she slipped inside. Then he rounded to the driver's seat. Once they were on the road, the hush in the car was palpable. Elena studied the faint city lights whizzing by, waiting for him to speak. Eventually he did, eyes fixed ahead. "How confident are you about these negotiations?" The question came out softly. She startled for a second, not expecting him to seek her opinion. She was hardly an expert negotiator, but she answered as earnestly as she could. "From what I've seen in the proposals, the synergy is strong. Both parties stand to gain significantly. I believe it's promising, especially if we address their concerns about supply chain logistics." He nodded slowly, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "Yes. Their main worry is about shipping times and reliability. Good that you picked up on that." They fell silent again, though this time the quiet felt a bit more comfortable, as if they'd exchanged some small piece of trust. After a while, the hotel loomed ahead, a tower of shimmering windows. Mr. Drake expertly maneuvered into the private valet area. Before Elena could undo her seatbelt, he turned slightly in his seat, his gaze flickering over her outfit. "You look professional," he said, almost as though he were verifying that she met some invisible standard. "Remember, minimal conversation unless necessary. They might view too much involvement from a secretary as intrusive." A pang of indignation stirred in Elena, but she swallowed it, reminding herself this was how certain conservative business dealings worked. "Understood?" Within minutes, they stood at the entrance to a private banquet suite, elegantly furnished with round tables draped in fine linens, an expansive window revealing the glittering cityscape below. The Japanese associates arrived soon after, bowing politely, their black suits pristine. A swirl of greetings in both English and Japanese filled the suite. Alexander Drake gave a formal introduction, referencing the presence of his assistant to handle any last-minute contractual points. Elena tried to maintain an inconspicuous position off to one side, scanning each face for clues. The head of the Japanese team, Mr. Tanaka, seemed cordial enough, but she could sense the tension. This was not a friendly dinner. It was a test, a stage to see if Drake Enterprises could truly be the formidable ally they hoped for. Dinner began, course after elaborate course. Elena's seat was somewhat behind Mr. Drake, angled so she could offer him notes or documents as needed. She was aware of how the men hardly acknowledged her presence. Only once did Mr. Tanaka address her directly, requesting a figure from the shipping analysis. She handed him a neatly printed spreadsheet, responding in a low voice so as not to disrupt the conversation. He offered a nod, but no smile. The negotiation portion took flight as dessert was served. The men debated risk-sharing, revenue splits, insurance liabilities, topics that soared in complexity. Elena watched Alexander Drake, impressed by his composure. He delivered sharp, methodical replies in his measured timbre. He didn't mince words, but there was no rudeness. It was a balancing act of assurance and firmness, and she saw the effect on the Japanese side. They began to relax, becoming more receptive to his proposals. Near the end of the discussion, a subtle flicker of tension flared. Mr. Tanaka referred to a lingering doubt about shipping route commitments, something that could tie up the final signature. At once, Elena saw Mr. Drake's jaw tighten. This was the moment everything might unravel. She sifted through her binder, recalling that she had prepared a backup plan addressing precisely these concerns. Slipping from her seat, she moved to Mr. Drake's side and whispered, "I have an alternate shipping schedule and route details that might ease their concerns." He gave a curt nod, then addressed Mr. Tanaka. "We've anticipated your concern and prepared an alternative." With a graceful hand gesture, he indicated Elena. "My associate will present the relevant data." Surprised, she stepped forward. The entire table fixed their gazes on her. Calmly, Elena spread out the color-coded schedules, walking Mr. Tanaka through the proposed changes. She explained how these alternative routes cut time by 10%, relied on more stable seaports, and ensured fewer cargo delays in peak seasons. Her voice wavered at first, but she found a steady rhythm, fueled by her thorough preparation. When she finished, the Japanese associates exchanged thoughtful murmurs. Mr. Tanaka's eyebrows rose and his posture softened. "Impressive," he said in accented English. "Very thorough approach." Mr. Drake, arms folded, nodded approvingly. Elena eased back a step, her heart pounding with a blend of adrenaline and relief. If this turned the tide, maybe the partnership would be sealed. The remainder of the dinner went smoothly. With the final brandy glasses served, Mr. Tanaka rose for his formal closing remarks. "Drake-san, we will consult with our board, but I see strong promise here. You have answered our chief concern. Please expect a final response within days." They bowed. The meeting concluded. A ripple of relief spread among the associates, and Elena could see a faint glimmer of triumph in Mr. Drake's previously guarded expression. As the group dispersed, staff at the hotel began clearing plates. Elena found herself near the large windows, gazing at the sparkling city. Exhaustion mingled with satisfaction. She glanced over to see Alexander Drake approaching, his stride still measured, but there was a subtle warmth in his gray eyes. "You handled that situation perfectly," he said quietly. "I appreciate your initiative. That might have been the deciding factor." He paused, studying her intently. The hush of the suite enveloped them in a rare private moment. He began to say something else, then caught himself, voice faltering. "Thank you, Ms. Turner." Elena's cheeks warmed, but she mustered a professional nod. "I'm just doing my job, sir." He inclined his head, an unspoken gravity in his expression, as though there was more he wished he could convey. But a second later, the tension in his body returned. He straightened, adjusting his suit jacket. "We should go. The car is waiting." Elena lingered only a second, letting the moment settle inside her. Then she followed him out of the suite, the echo of her heels on polished marble fading into the hush of the corridor. In the back of her mind, she wondered if he felt it too, a quiver in the rigid walls around him, a subtle shift that hinted at possibilities he hadn't considered in years. It was just the beginning, though neither fully understood the path it would set them on. Outside, the city glowed with restless potential, and somewhere behind Alexander Drake's reticent gaze, she sensed a crack forming in his armored heart. The man who hadn't allowed a single woman near him for 5 years had perhaps unknowingly taken a small step closer to letting someone in. Elena woke the next morning with an unmistakable sense of accomplishment still coursing through her veins. Even with the weight of exhaustion pressing on her, she felt buoyed by the fact that the critical dinner had been a resounding success, one in which her own contributions had played no small part. While sipping her coffee, she replayed highlights of the previous night. The quiet intensity in Mr. Drake's eyes after she presented the shipping alternative, the flicker of gratitude in his voice when he thanked her. He'd never shown open warmth, but she couldn't forget that flash of genuine relief he'd let slip. Those tiny human moments lingered in her mind more than any praise from colleagues ever had. Her phone buzzed with the morning's notifications. The first was a short text from Danielle, the administrative coordinator. "Congratulations, Elena. Word is, the dinner went off flawlessly. The men from Tokyo were impressed. You earned some serious respect." A smile curved on Elena's lips. Respect. That was a rare commodity around Drake Enterprises, given how many staff members simply floated through tasks in a state of silent apprehension. She tapped out a quick reply to Danielle thanking her. Then she saw another message, a short email from Mr. Drake's account. To Ms. Turner. Subject, follow-up. "Good morning. I would like a debrief on last night's dinner results. Please come to my office at 8:30. There is more to discuss regarding the negotiation. A. Drake. Elena felt her heartbeat quicken. More to discuss. She imagined him at his desk, already dissecting next steps for the partnership, analyzing the risk factors. But perhaps there was also something else he wanted to say. Some direct acknowledgement of her work, or maybe she was letting idle hope get the better of her. Setting aside her personal musings, she finished dressing in a simple gray dress, pinned up her hair, and headed to the office with determination. She arrived at Drake Enterprises in time to see the earliest shift of employees bustling in. As usual, the top floor exuded its typically hushed aura, but Elena sensed a subtle undercurrent of excitement. The staff had heard the deal was on track, and many recognized that the company's fortunes had just taken a leap forward. She made her way to her desk, glancing at the clock. 8:25. Just as she was about to organize her notepad, the tall doors of Mr. Drake's office opened, and there he was, standing in the threshold. Even from a distance, Elena noticed something different. Maybe it was just the aftermath of the successful negotiations, but he seemed lighter, as if a great weight had momentarily lifted off his shoulders. He met her eyes for a brief instant, then gestured for her to enter. Inside, she found him standing by the wide windows, sunlight reflecting off the polished floor. Spreadsheets and a laptop were arranged on the coffee table rather than his desk, which was unusual. He motioned for her to join him there. "Please have a seat," he said, settling onto one of the leather chairs. She complied, opening her notepad. For a moment they sat across from each other without speaking. The city skyline behind him glowed with late-morning brightness. He inhaled, as if steadying himself, then began, "Mr. Tanaka sent an initial letter of intent early this morning. He wants to finalize terms within the next week, so we need to prepare a formal draft of the contract." He slid a thin folder across the table toward her. "Here's the letter with their proposed changes. I'll also want your notes from last night, particularly how they received that shipping plan." Elena nodded, quickly scanning the letter. "I'll get right to work. It looks like they want a slightly different distribution of liability for delays. Yes, they also want a more stringent performance guarantee. We can manage that, assuming we have some measure of flexibility built into our shipping contracts." She jotted bullet points in neat handwriting, but despite the flurry of professional tasks swirling, she couldn't ignore the tension in her own chest. Yesterday's dinner had brought them a tiny step closer. She felt it, as surely as she felt the warmth of the sun on her arms right now. And she wondered if he felt it too. Mr. Drake cleared his throat. "I also wanted to personally acknowledge your efforts." The words dropped into the air, quiet but deliberate. "You handled yourself well. I'm not sure if you realize how pivotal that additional shipping plan was to their decision." Her cheeks warmed. He rarely gave compliments so directly. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm glad I could help." He paused, like he wanted to say more, but then stood. "There's a lot ahead of us. I trust you'll keep your usual meticulousness." With that, the conversation ended. Typical Drake fashion, Elena thought. Just when the moment might open into something more personal, he retreated behind a wall of professional composure. Still, she left his office with a sense of accomplishment, plus a twinge of curiosity. Something in his expression told her he was battling invisible forces she had yet to understand. The day fell back into its routine. Elena worked diligently drafting the formal contract, emailing back and forth with the legal department, ensuring every risk clause was properly stated. Whenever she walked the corridors, she noticed a subtle shift in how colleagues treated her. She was no longer seen merely as the new secretary. People offered polite smiles, asked for her input on small tasks, or congratulated her in passing. It felt good, of course, but she also understood that her real test had only begun. Maintaining Mr. Drake's trust and continuing to navigate his unspoken rules would be more challenging than any single dinner negotiation. In the afternoon, Danielle stopped by. She looked far less formal than usual, her expression warm. "Elena, might I steal a moment?" "Sure," Elena said, moving a stack of papers aside so Danielle could lean on her desk. Leaning in, Danielle spoke in a lowered voice. "I was with Mr. Drake for years. He never once took a secretary to a high-profile dinner. And for you to have played such an active role is unprecedented." She pressed her lips together thoughtfully. "Just be ready for extra scrutiny. People around here can get jealous." Elena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I appreciate the heads up. I'll try to keep a low profile." Danielle gave a faint smile and said, "I figured I'd mention it. The dynamic is complicated. Some might see your success as a threat or speculate that something else is going on between you and Mr. Drake." She paused, arching an eyebrow. "In truth, if there's anyone in this building who might find that disturbing, it's those who've tried for years to build a personal bond with him and failed." Elena frowned, feeling a pang of discomfort at the mention of something else. "I can't help what people think," she replied softly, "but I'm focused on my job, nothing more." "Of course," Danielle acknowledged. "Well, you have my support if you need it." "Thank you," Elena said, her voice earnest. Danielle left, and Elena was left reflecting on how quickly success could breed suspicion. Already she could imagine the rumor mill, talk of the untouchable CEO who'd chosen a new secretary for a reason. For Elena's part, even if she felt a growing empathy, and yes, curiosity, about the man behind the job title, her priority was her family's financial stability. She couldn't risk messing this up. That evening, as she was gathering her belongings to leave, her phone buzzed. It was a short internal message from Mr. Drake. "I need to review a few details regarding shipping routes. Could you come to my office?" Elena set down her purse. It was nearly 7, well past normal business hours, but that was typical in Drake Enterprises. She made her way down the corridor, noticing the hush that always settled after most staff had gone home. Only the faint hum of distant elevators broke the silence. She knocked lightly on his door and let herself in. Mr. Drake was seated behind his imposing desk, necktie loosened, a rare sign of fatigue. Several shipping route maps were spread across the desk, dotted with notes and red circles. He gestured for her to approach. "Something isn't adding up," he muttered, massaging the bridge of his nose. "This alternate route that we proposed, do you have the breakdown of the cargo tonnage distribution?" "Yes, it's here," Elena said, setting the file down. She pointed to a table in the document. "It shows how freight volumes would shift among the 5 major ports." He scanned it, brow furrowed. She realized uncomfortably how close they were standing. But for once, he didn't seem to notice the proximity. Or if he did, he didn't step back. Instead, his eyes flitted from the map to the printed chart. "Right," he said. "So if these ports receive an extra 15% cargo, we'll need a revised deal with those port authorities." He tapped a figure. "I have to lock this in before Tanaka's group finalizes the contract. Otherwise, we risk making promises we can't keep." He sank into his chair, exhaling. Elena recognized that exhausted posture. He was nearing his limit for the day. "I'll make contact first thing in the morning," she offered. "We can approach each port authority with new terms." His gaze lifted to hers. "That'd be helpful." He swiveled his chair aside, his normally immaculate posture sagging slightly. "It never ends, does it?" Elena hesitated. Something in his voice sounded unexpectedly weary. She closed the file. "Would you like me to schedule a call with them tonight? Or do you prefer to wait until morning?" He shook his head. "Let's wait. They won't be in their offices now." "Thank you, Ms. Turner." Then a faint, wry smirk touched his lips, so subtle she almost missed it. "You're always so thorough." Her heart gave a peculiar tug. She could see in his eyes a strange mix of appreciation and reluctance, almost as if he was fighting a battle to keep from letting that gratitude become something more. His next words came out carefully. "I know I push you hard. I know I can be difficult to deal with. But your dedication has not gone unnoticed." Warmth bloomed in Elena's chest. The hours spent triple-checking figures, the late nights, the endless phone calls, it all felt worth it in that moment. "I appreciate that, Mr. Drake, truly. This job is important to me, and I want to do it well." Silence settled over them. She suddenly realized they were alone in the massive office, the only illumination coming from the city lights behind him and a single standing lamp. A hush that in any other scenario might feel intimate. For a heartbeat, the tension was palpable. She could almost hear the rhythm of her own pulse. Yet, as though he'd been doused with cold water, Alexander Drake cleared his throat and straightened. "Thank you," he said again, regaining his composure. "That will be all for tonight." Elena nodded, retrieving her file. Before she exited, she cast one last glance at him. In the shadowy light, he looked like a man haunted by something that transcended business worries. She left quietly, a swirl of conflicted emotions accompanying her all the way home. In the solitude of her small apartment, Elena found herself unable to sleep. She paced her living room, replaying that final scene in her mind. The hush of his office, the weight of whatever guarded secrets he carried, and the push and pull in his expression, as if he wished to connect yet simultaneously feared it. "Stop it," she murmured to herself. "You're reading too much into this." She glanced at an old photo of her parents on the kitchen counter. They, too, had once struggled to keep their finances afloat, and she was doing everything possible to ensure her own family didn't slip into ruin. She reminded herself of her priorities. She needed to keep a clear head. That didn't keep her from recalling the rumors swirling around the company that after a tragic accident, Alexander Drake vowed never to let a woman into his life again, not in romance nor in friendship. She wondered how a man so successful, so confident in the professional realm, could be so locked away on a personal level. But curiosity is a sneaky emotion. It gnawed at her long after she should have let it go. "I'll just do my job," she told herself firmly, lowering onto her couch. "Get my paycheck, save my family from this crisis, and mind my own business." The vow sounded perfectly rational. Yet, lying in the darkness with the city lights glimmering through her window, she couldn't silence the quiet voice inside that insisted there was more at stake here than a paycheck. She sensed that Mr. Drake needed something intangible, something that had nothing to do with profit margins or shipping schedules. And strangely enough, she realized she wanted to be the one to help him find it, even if that meant stepping beyond the safety of her role as a dutiful secretary. The next day brought fresh challenges. A scheduling conflict erupted when the port authorities insisted on a different time slot for negotiations, forcing Elena to juggle 5 calls at once. Just when she thought she had it under control, an unexpected client from overseas arrived for a surprise visit, demanding a quick meeting with Mr. Drake. Every nerve in her body buzzed with stress. During a brief lull, she retreated to the break room for water. That was when she overheard 2 employees from the finance team gossiping near the coffee machine. "I'm telling you, I saw them leaving together last night, just the 2 of them," a woman whispered, voice tinged with scandalous excitement. Could it be that she's the first in 5 years to break his no-contact vow? Her companion snorted. "You think so? As if he'd date someone who works under him? That would be a scandal. But maybe that's her game, climbing the ladder through him." Elena's stomach twisted. She felt an irrational surge of anger. This was exactly what Danielle had warned her about, the rumor mill in full force. Knowing it was better not to confront them, she slipped away, biting her lip. She loathed the notion of being perceived as someone plotting to seduce her boss just to advance. She had never considered such a thing. When she returned to her desk, Mr. Drake was stepping out of his office, an impatient glint in his eye. Ms. Turner, he said, leveling his gaze at her. I need you to confirm the new call schedule with the shipping authorities. Immediately. She stifled her own frustrations, plastered on a professional calm. Of course, sir. I'll handle it right now. He started to turn away but paused, noticing her tense expression. For the briefest second, a flicker of concern crossed his face. Everything all right? Her pulse gave a traitorous leap. He rarely inquired about personal well-being. She forced a neutral smile. Yes, just a busy day. He seemed to accept that explanation and nodded. We'll talk after the calls. Later, Elena found a moment to stand by the large corridor window, letting the city view calm her rattled nerves. She was half lost in thought when she heard a voice behind her. It was Mr. Drake, footsteps quiet over the polished floor. She turned abruptly. What's wrong? He asked, gaze direct. You seem off. Caught off guard by his observation, she drew a breath. Did she dare mention the gossip? No, too personal. She forced a light shrug. It's just the usual chaos. I'm fine, though. He studied her, gray eyes flickering as though searching for evidence of a lie. For an unnerving heartbeat, she thought he might press the issue. But instead he gave her that almost smile again, like a half-formed notion of warmth. This business can be relentless, he said quietly, but you've managed well. If anything becomes unmanageable, let me know. With that, he departed, leaving behind only the echo of his footsteps and a swirl of questions in her heart. She watched him go, marveling at how a man so seemingly aloof could, in the span of a few days, shift his tone enough to show a trace of empathy. It was a mild gesture, yes, but something told her that for him, it was significant. As the sun set beyond the skyscrapers, Elena returned to her desk, a renewed determination stirring inside her. She was stepping into deeper waters with every passing day, balancing professional responsibilities, the swirling office rumor mill, and the quiet, guarded signals from her boss. She sensed that soon, forces beyond their daily routine would force them to confront the invisible boundaries Alexander Drake had so meticulously built. Whether she was prepared or not, a storm was on the horizon, and everything she'd experienced so far, every fleeting moment of closeness, every shred of gossip, every barrier, might just be the prelude to a far more profound upheaval in both their lives. The elevator doors whispered shut behind Elena as she stepped onto the executive floor. It was earlier than usual, so early in fact, that the hall lights were still in nighttime mode, casting only a low glow on the plush carpet. She'd barely slept, haunted by questions she couldn't quite name, yet determined to stay on top of her responsibilities. Pulling her blazer tighter around her shoulders, she headed for her desk, quietly reciting the day's to-do list in her mind. For a few peaceful moments, she savored the stillness. She organized her notes and scanned her email for any urgent updates from the Tokyo team or from the port authorities. But no sooner had she launched her inbox than footsteps echoed down the corridor. She knew that measured stride. It was Mr. Drake. A slight flutter danced in her stomach as he emerged from the shadows, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Ms. Turner, he greeted, voice subdued in the hush. You're in early. She took a calming breath. I wanted to finalize the shipping agreements before the overseas calls begin, she answered, gesturing to the stack of papers on her desk. I have updated estimates from Port Amberton and the Redwood facility that might affect the timeline. He studied her expression for a moment, and then his gaze dropped to the documents. Good. I'd like to see them. They walked together to his office, Elena matching her pace to his, maintaining a subtle distance. The door closed behind them, and she placed the reports on his broad desk. A faint trace of his cologne reached her, crisp and clean, stirring her senses unexpectedly. She resisted the temptation to dwell on it. He flipped through the pages with his usual meticulous air. These numbers are workable, he murmured half to himself, though Redwood's staff is notorious for delays. We'll have to push them harder if we want to meet Tanaka's expectations. Elena perched on the edge of a chair, pen poised above her notepad. She took dictation as he spoke, wanting to capture every instruction. An entire day's schedule had yet to begin, but from the tension lining his brow, she could see he was already in full gear. "You have a flawless sense of timing," he remarked, closing the folder. "It's like you anticipate issues before they arise." A swell of pride warmed her chest. She managed a polite smile, eyes still lowered to her notepad. "I try to stay a step ahead, Mr. Drake. It makes the workflow smoother." He nodded. Indeed. That single word felt like a quiet commendation. Outside, the first rays of morning sunlight were stretching across the windows, brightening the office. He set the folder aside, then reached for his phone. "I'm about to jump on a call with Redwood's manager. Wait here for a moment. There might be follow-up changes I'll need you to draft." Elena watched as he tapped a number and placed the call on speaker, mindful that she was listening. His voice shifted to a brisk, authoritative tone as the manager answered. Negotiations over shipping loads and crane availability ensued. Elena quickly jotted down fresh details. Redwood's capacity for an extra 10 containers per day, their request for a slightly longer lead time before ramp-up. Every so often, Mr. Drake glanced her way, giving a faint nod when he needed her to note a critical point. After nearly 20 minutes, he ended the call. Elena exhaled, rolling her wrist to ease the tension of so much scribbling. "I'll incorporate these changes into the proposed timeline," she said, scanning her notes. "Do that," Mr. Drake said. Then his gaze settled on her, curiosity evident in the lines of his face. "You're absorbing a lot of pressure from all these new demands. Are you managing all right?" She hesitated. The question again felt personal. His expression was guarded, yet his tone was softly concerned, reminiscent of how he'd spoken to her in the corridor the day before. She cleared her throat, determined not to reveal how frazzled she occasionally felt. "I'm handling it. It's busy, but it's invigorating, in a way." He studied her for a beat, as if weighing whether to probe further. His next words were crisp. "Good. If it's too much, let me know. I don't want mistakes on crucial details." He stood, indicating the discussion was done. "Send me the updated schedule within the hour." She gathered her notes, nodded, and quietly slipped out. Back at her desk, the memory of that fleeting look in his eyes lingered, a mix of habitual caution and a glimmer of concern. She couldn't recall any previous boss who bothered to ask about her well-being in the midst of negotiations. That dichotomy, his strict distance paired with subtle care, left her more intrigued than ever. The rest of the morning was a whirlwind. High-level meetings about cost projections, phone consultations with external advisors, and a last-minute fiasco involving a misrouted pallet of materials all vied for Elena's attention. By midday, she was frantically typing a revised contract addendum while simultaneously fielding calls from 2 different time zones. A handful of colleagues started drifting near her desk, congratulating her on how quickly she'd adapted. Others offered veiled compliments that felt more like coded barbs, as if to say, "We see you cozying up to the big boss." She brushed off those insinuations with polite smiles, but inside she felt a pang every time. The worst thing would be for these rumors to escalate. She was certain Mr. Drake would not tolerate a swirl of personal gossip overshadowing his professional empire. In the early afternoon, Danielle appeared, phone in hand. "There's a call from your father's health insurance provider," she said gently, covering the mouthpiece. "They insist they need to speak with you." Elena's pulse skipped. Her father, her family's precarious finances, she'd almost succeeded in pushing those worries aside for the day. "I'll take it," she murmured. She stood, heading for a small private lounge area near the elevator so she wouldn't disturb the staff. The phone crackled. A polite but firm voice informed her that her father's coverage was lapsing because of missed payments. Tension lanced through her chest. She tried to negotiate, explaining she was on the verge of stabilizing the family's finances, that she just needed a bit more time, but the insurance representative gave her a rote response. Deadline, penalties, possible loss of coverage. It would all come down to whether she could wire a sizable payment soon. By the time she ended the call, her hands were shaking. She felt the weight of her father's medical bills pressing down. This job at Drake Enterprises was her best shot at securing enough money to keep him insured and cared for. She leaned against the lounge's wall, inhaling deeply. She had to remain calm. She could handle it. She had to. When she stepped back onto the main floor, though, Mr. Drake was standing at her desk, scanning the open files. He looked up, noticing the strain etched on her face. "Everything all right?" he asked a second time, voice lowered so others wouldn't overhear. Elena forced a courteous smile. "Yes, just a personal matter. I have your revised schedule here." She willed her voice to remain steady as she handed him a freshly printed document. He eyed her with quiet skepticism. "I'll be in my office," he said at length, taking the papers from her. "If anything else comes up, let me know." She nodded stiffly. Once he was gone, her composure faltered, and she had to sit, pressing her palms to her temples. Already, her father's next medical procedure loomed, and she worried how to produce the funds in time. She could ask for an advance, but the notion unsettled her. What if Mr. Drake saw it as a sign of instability or a breach of professionalism? She hesitated, torn by a swirl of fear and desperation. The hours ticked on. Elena buried herself in tasks, trying to outrun her anxieties. Yet no matter how many documents she filed or how many phone calls she answered, the dread in her chest wouldn't fade. By late afternoon, she was rechecking a shipping invoice when she sensed a presence beside her. Glancing up, she found Mr. Drake standing there, expression unreadable. "I have to visit the Redwood site in person," he said. "They're requesting a face-to-face to finalize expansions. It's a short flight. I'll be leaving first thing tomorrow. I'd like you to come along to handle documentation and expedite real-time updates." Her heart lurched, half in excitement at the trust he was placing in her, half in panic that she'd be traveling while her father's insurance crisis remained unresolved. "Tomorrow?" she echoed, swallowing. "Of course, Mr. Drake. Just let me arrange my tasks accordingly." He nodded, gaze flickering over her once more. "I'll have Danielle book our flight. We'll only be gone a day, possibly overnight if negotiations drag." "Understood," she said softly, forcing a neutral expression. His eyes lingered on her face, as if drawn by something she couldn't name. Then he turned away, returning to his office. She exhaled shakily, pressing her knuckles to her lips. Could she afford to be away? She reasoned that a day or two might not make a difference in the insurance matter, but if things extended, she might lose precious time to sort out her father's coverage. Yet refusing such an assignment was unthinkable. She had no choice but to comply. That evening, after nearly everyone had left, Elena gathered her files for the Redwood trip. Mr. Drake's door was ajar, warm light spilling into the corridor. She stepped in to confirm details about their departure. He was by the window, reviewing a city map pinned to a board. Some real estate expansion plan, no doubt. He turned at her knock, his expression shadowed by the dim overhead light. "Yes, Ms. Turner?" "I just wanted to finalize the Redwood schedule," she said, holding up a folder. "Our flight is at 8, correct?" He nodded. "We'll land at 10, drive straight to their headquarters, meet with the site's project lead." He paused, eyes flicking to her face. "Is everything ready on your end?" "Yes, She hesitated, thinking of the swirling chaos in her personal life. "I'll be prepared. Don't worry." He took a step closer. "You seem preoccupied," he said, voice unusually soft. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Her breath caught. Part of her wanted to confide in him, explain how she was drowning in worry over her father's medical bills. But logic and caution flared. He was her boss, and the boundaries remained. She simply shook her head. "I'm all right. Just busy." His expression revealed a brief flicker of doubt, as though he sensed her words were incomplete. But he let it pass. "Get some rest. We'll need to be sharp tomorrow." She murmured agreement and turned to go. Before she reached the door, though, he spoke again in a tone tinged with quiet earnestness. "Elena." She froze at the sound of her first name from his lips. It was the first time he'd said it so plainly, absent the formal Ms. Turner. The moment felt like a pin dropping in a silent room. She looked over her shoulder, heart racing. He gave the smallest shake of his head, perhaps regretting his slip, or perhaps bracing himself to continue. "I appreciate how dedicated you are. Most people at your level wouldn't handle half of what I've thrown at you. If you need anything, let me know." Her gaze caught his, and 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. A surge of warmth threatened to unravel her composure. She merely nodded, forcibly calm. "Thank you, Mr. Drake. I'll keep that in mind." She slipped out, the sound of her heels echoing softly in the deserted corridor. As she waited for the elevator, her thoughts spun with the significance of that brief exchange. The gentle way he'd said her name, the worry that ghosted in his eyes. She realized that the more he let slip these small moments of connection, the more her own defenses buckled. Could she keep their dynamic strictly professional if he was beginning to treat her with that rare brand of intimacy? That, coupled with the rumors swirling around the office, created a precarious tightrope. By the time she reached home, she found herself pacing once again through her small living room. She had to call the insurance provider, renegotiate for an extension. Her father's health was paramount. After a tense conversation, she managed to buy herself an extra week. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Then she texted her mother, promising she'd send money as soon as she could. The guilt and worry weighed on her, a silent burden she carried alone. She lit a small lamp on her side table, glancing at a photograph of herself with her parents. Her father had once been so strong. He'd coached her in sports, taught her resilience. The memory pained her now. With a shaky sigh, she realized that her only option was to excel at her job, no matter how demanding Mr. Drake became. If that meant traveling, doubling her hours, stepping up in ways she never imagined, so be it. The Redwood trip would have to be a success. Any raise, any bonus might tip the scales in paying for her father's treatment. She told herself that was all she needed to care about. Yet, drifting to sleep, she couldn't deny the flicker of warmth that surfaced whenever she recalled how Alexander Drake had said her name. It lingered, weaving through her dreams like a tiny flame in a dark room. She felt reckless even acknowledging it, but it was there nonetheless, a sign that the fortress around his heart had begun to crack. If she wasn't careful, she might find herself stepping inside. Dawn broke quietly, and Elena pulled her suitcase from the closet, packing only the essentials for the overnight Redwood trip. She forced a confident expression in the bathroom mirror, trying not to think about how it would feel, traveling alone with her enigmatic boss. Within an hour, she was in a company car headed to the airport. Mr. Drake sat beside her, reviewing emails on his phone. He offered her a brief nod of greeting, but they spoke little. Silence hung between them, a strange hush charged with possibilities unspoken. They arrived at the private terminal, breezing through security with no lines or fuss. On the tarmac waited a sleek jet with the Drake Enterprises logo. Elena had never flown privately before, and she felt the momentary thrill. The pilot tipped his cap. A flight attendant greeted them politely, guiding them into a spacious cabin furnished like a stylish office in the sky. Polished wood paneling, leather seats, a small conference table. Once on board, Mr. Drake settled into a seat, motioning for Elena to take the one opposite him. Engines hummed softly in the background. As the plane began its taxi, he opened his laptop. "We'll review the Redwood contract changes once we're at cruising altitude," he said, businesslike. "It's about a 2-hour flight. Let's not waste any time." She nodded, ignoring the slight flutter in her chest. "Of course," she agreed. Inwardly, though, her thoughts strayed from shipping contracts to the swirl of tensions that accompanied them. She remembered the rumors at the office, the precarious financial state at home, and the curious shift in Mr. Drake's demeanor these last few days. She felt as though she were stepping onto a tightrope, one that stretched precariously across her future, both professional and personal. Her phone buzzed with a final text before takeoff. Danielle, wishing them luck. Elena smiled wanly at her screen. She locked the phone, stowed it away, and focused on the man across from her who was already diving into spreadsheets. She told herself that if she stayed resolute, she could keep everything under control. Work, family obligations. The unspoken yearning sparked by Alexander Drake's quiet concern. But high above the clouds, on a private jet, en route to a place where more negotiations and further revelations awaited them, Elena felt the first stirring of an undeniable truth. Some lines once crossed cannot be undone. And in the flicker of his eyes when he looked up from the laptop, she read that maybe, just maybe, Alexander Drake was no longer fully certain he wanted to hold those walls in place. A velvety hush pervaded the cabin as the jet soared through bands of white, sunlit clouds. Elena sat across from Alexander Drake at the small conference table, mentally preparing for the negotiations awaiting them in Redwood. She had her binder open, bullet points neatly tabbed, but every so often her mind drifted from shipping capacity to the man flipping through financial statements a mere arm's length away. He had spoken little since takeoff. Their conversation consisted of occasional clarifications, her reading him a figure, him offering a succinct response, yet an undercurrent of tension pulsed, one that hadn't existed when she first started working for him. She couldn't help noticing subtle details, the way his gaze lingered on her a beat longer if he thought she didn't see, or how he had almost spontaneously called her by her first name the night before. When Mr. Drake finally shut his laptop, the silence rang loudly in Elena's ears. Outside, beams of sunlight washed across the plush seats and the polished interior panels. The flight attendant had discreetly left them to their work, only peeking in to offer refreshments. "Ms. Turner," he said, voice measured, "let's review the Redwood expansion deal once more. Their official request is to boost container processing by 20%, correct?" She nodded, clearing her throat. "Yes. They want that capacity by the end of the next quarter. In the meantime, Redwood wants certain assurances, tech upgrades, better on-site staffing, and possibly a discount on licensing fees if we don't hit the capacity target on time." He pressed a fingertip to his temple, scanning the bulleted list she'd laid out on the table. "We can accommodate some adjustments in staffing, but as for licensing fees..." He gave a tight sigh. "It's non-negotiable. We already give Redwood a discounted rate." "Yes, sir," Elena agreed, sliding a revised contract across to him. "I've flagged that particular clause. The plan is to stand firm. I suspect Redwood might push, but they'll fold if we offer a compromise on the scheduling side." Mr. Drake offered a curt nod. "That's precisely what we'll do, then." They fell silent again, finalizing the strategy with only the hum of the engines to fill the cabin. Elena picked up her notepad, scribbling updates. For a flicker of a moment, she wished they could talk about something less rigid. Anything beyond shipping timetables and cost breakouts. She pushed the thought away. This was her job, after all. Minutes later, he shut the folder and leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "We'll land soon." She glanced through the window. Farmland and scattered roads sprawled below. Their flight path was descending. The Redwood site was located near a mid-sized city, about an hour's drive from the smaller regional airport. Elena braced herself for a long day, and possibly night, of negotiations. She told herself it was necessary if she was to remain invaluable and, in turn, secure her family's future. As the jet touched down on the runway, the flight attendant reappeared, smiling politely. Elena quickly gathered her documents, tucking them neatly into her carry-on. Mr. Drake rose, smoothing the front of his tailored suit. For a moment, their eyes met in the muted daylight of the descending cabin. She saw determination in his expression, underlaid by a flicker of something else. Private thoughts, guarded behind a practiced stare. She smiled politely, and they stepped off the plane together. A sleek black sedan waited just off the tarmac, driver at the ready. Elena and Mr. Drake climbed in, and soon they were on their way, breezing down a rural highway lined with farmland. The transition from the city's skyscrapers to this quieter landscape felt strangely jarring but also refreshing. Rolling hills, neat rows of crops, the occasional barn. Elena watched it all flow past the window, half listening as Mr. Drake conversed with the driver about travel logistics. They reached Redwood's headquarters, an expansive industrial site flanked by tall fences and busy loading bays. Clusters of workers in neon vests tended to trucks rolling in and out, each step a cog in a supply chain that fed markets halfway across the world. Elena found herself mesmerized by the scope of it. Her professional curiosity piqued. A small, welcoming committee approached as they exited the sedan. Leading the group was Raymond Lynch, Redwood's operations manager, who extended a firm handshake to Mr. Drake. "Glad you made it safely, Alexander." Elena noted the familiarity. Lynch then turned to her with a polite nod. "And you must be Ms. Turner. Good to meet you." She returned the greeting, mindful that Redwood's staff would be observing her every move. In the next instant, her boss's voice cut through. "Let's move inside. We have a packed agenda." The crisp authority in Alexander Drake's tone left no doubt that he was in command, but he paused briefly, allowing Elena to fall in step beside him. Inside Redwood's administrative building, they traversed corridors lined with windows overlooking the factory's mechanized operations. Eventually, they arrived at a large conference room where coffee, water, and neatly arranged documents awaited them. A few Redwood executives took their seats, exchanging clipped pleasantries. Elena remained slightly behind Mr. Drake, remembering the sense of strategy from the Tokyo dinner. She was here to facilitate and present data, not to overshadow the negotiation. Once introductions were made, the real work began. Mr. Drake launched into a thorough explanation of the expansions needed for Redwood's facility, referencing Elena's meticulously organized slides. Lynch and his team countered with concerns over staffing costs and overhead. Elena typed notes in real time, occasionally interjecting to provide a clarifying figure. Every time she spoke, Mr. Drake's attention flicked to her with a quiet respect, as if acknowledging how crucial her input was. The hours melted away. They debated everything from forklift procurement schedules to advanced scanning technology for container contents. Redwood insisted on renegotiating specific fees if expansions weren't met by a strict deadline. Mr. Drake refused, pointing out the risk of inflation and supply disruptions. Elena found herself stepping in with alternative suggestions, sliding timelines, tying contract bonuses to partial capacity. Each time she contributed, Mr. Drake cast her a brief, almost imperceptible nod as though to say, "Good thinking. Keep going." By dusk, the negotiations had reached a stalemate. Everyone's frustration was palpable, making the air in the conference room feel thick. As Redwood's CFO demanded a break, Mr. Drake inclined his head in agreement, albeit reluctantly. "Very well. 30 minutes." People stood, stretching. Elena, who had been near the projector, exhaled. She saw a flicker of tension in Mr. Drake's eyes. He disliked delays. She herself was exhausted from hours of back and forth, but they still had no final contract hammered out. Raymond Lynch approached them, a taut smile on his face. "Perhaps we can reconvene over dinner tonight. We have a decent restaurant near the city center. I suggest we continue the discussion there." Mr. Drake glanced at Elena, who was already flipping through the schedule. He rarely let negotiations extend into a social setting unless absolutely necessary, but Redwood's manager was right. This might be the only way to push matters forward. "Fine," he said. "We'll meet at 8. Lynch gave Elena a polite wave and retreated to speak with his colleagues. Mr. Drake turned to her. "Let's step out and get some fresh air. Bring your notes." Outside, the sun was dipping behind the industrial compound, painting the sky orange. They found a small walkway near the loading docks, relatively quiet apart from the distant rumble of machinery. Elena hugged her tablet to her chest, trying to gather her thoughts. She studied her boss's profile, the tension in the set of his jaw, the way he briefly pressed a hand to the back of his neck as though staving off a headache. "This is typical Redwood," he said after a moment. "They dig in expecting we'll bend over backward, but we can't. That licensing fee is crucial to covering our overhead." Elena nodded. "I've flagged potential compromise points in the contract. Maybe we can sweeten the staffing upgrade portion. Redwood would see it as a tangible benefit, and we keep our licensing fee intact." A small exhale left him, possibly a relieved laugh. "Yes, that's precisely the angle we need. Offer them something they can't refuse, just not the thing we can't afford to give up." He turned, gazing at her in the waning light. "You've taken to this job with surprising skill. Most people balk at Redwood's intimidation tactics the first time around, but not you." She swallowed, feeling an unexpected wave of pride. "I appreciate that, sir." Despite her normal composure, she felt her cheeks grow warm. "I really just want to make sure the deal succeeds. For the company." His lips pressed into a thin line as though he was about to say something deeper but changed course. "Let's not let them stretch this out too long. We'll push for final signatures tonight if possible." In the distance, forklift trucks beeped and containers clanged. Another reminder that the entire operation, massive, unstoppable, was counting on them to secure the next phase. Elena blinked, realizing she was missing her father's phone call that she'd planned for tonight. But the negotiations couldn't wait. She'd have to text him later, assure him she was working on a solution. "Should we head back inside?" she asked quietly. He nodded, leading the way. Neither mentioned the subtle flicker of camaraderie that had sparked in the hush between them. Surrounded by steel crates and the smell of diesel, they'd still found a moment to share genuine respect. They reconvened in the Redwood boardroom at 8, as agreed. Instead of formal dinner plates or tablecloths, the Redwood staff had arranged a catered meal at the long conference table, trays of grilled meats, salads, and local specialties. It was a working dinner, every bite punctuated by debate over contract details. Tensions flared more than once. Redwood's CFO demanded quarterly oversight of expansion milestones. Mr. Drake bristled, refusing to cede that level of control. Elena intervened, suggesting a neutral third-party inspector whose reports could be shared. That placated Redwood somewhat, though not entirely. The clock inched past 9, then 10. Coffee replaced dinner, and the overhead lights flickered with an almost sterile glow. Elena's mind was a blur of language revisions, percentages, possible pivot points. The Redwood team stepped outside for yet another private caucus, leaving her and Mr. Drake alone at the table, half-eaten plates around them. She rubbed her temple, her eyes stung from reading fine print. "They're not budging on the licensing fee talk. Maybe we should frame it differently. Call it an infrastructure support cost or something that doesn't sound like a fee." He tapped a pen lightly against the table. "Interesting. A semantic shift, but it could be enough to save face on their end. Let's try that." She scribbled a note to revise the contract language. As she did, she glanced at him. A muscle twitched in his jaw. He caught her look and sighed softly. "This is draining, but you're handling it admirably." Her heart gave a small flip. The empathy in his voice was faint, but genuine. She forced a smile. "I'll keep going as long as you need me to." He studied her, lips parted like he wanted to say something else. But footsteps approached from the corridor, and Redwood's negotiators filed back in. The moment vanished. By midnight, The general counsel for Redwood declared they were close to agreement. Elena was certain she had typed every clause in existence for expansions, contingencies, disclaimers. With a final handshake, Redwood's CFO agreed to the revised arrangement, provided they'd finalize an official signature in the morning. Mr. Drake agreed, set a meeting for 9 a.m., and that was that. Relief flooded the room. As Redwood's staff dispersed, Lynch turned to them, saying, "We've booked you both rooms at the business hotel down the street. It's the best we can do on short notice. I'll have a car take you there now." Elena thanked him, stifling a yawn behind her hand. Moments later, Mr. Drake and Elena found themselves in the same black sedan, heading through dark, quiet streets lined with closed shops. The day's negotiations echoed through Elena's mind, a swirl of wins and compromises. Exhaustion pressed on her eyelids, but an odd sense of excitement still pulsed in her veins. She'd never been at the heart of such intense business dealings before. They pulled up to a modest 3-story hotel, well kept, but far from the opulence she associated with Drake Enterprises. After checking in at the small front desk, they stepped into a dimly lit hallway. Their rooms were side by side, 315 and 316. Elena held her keycard, feeling that hush descend once again, the hush that always seemed to envelop them when they were alone, absent any watchful eyes. "Get some rest," he murmured, meeting her gaze. "We've done well tonight." She returned a wan smile. "You too, Mr. Drake. See you in the morning?" He lingered a fraction of a second longer, perhaps to see if she would say anything else. Then, with a tight nod, he turned and slipped into his room. Elena released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Suddenly, she felt how drained she was from the day's intensity. She stepped into her own room, flicked on a lamp, and set down her briefcase. The space was tidy, a small bed and a functional desk. She sank onto the mattress, ignoring the late hour to text her mother, "Still in Redwood. Negotiations successful. Might have enough for Dad's coverage soon. Miss you guys." She closed her eyes, replaying the day's flurry of tension, from Redwood's bulldog CFO to the fleeting glimpses of Alexander Drake's more human side. The lines she had tried so hard to maintain felt dangerously thin. He'd shown her respect, at times even warmth, in ways that transcended typical boss-employee courtesy. She brushed a hand over her forehead, mind churning. It was both unsettling and exhilarating. At last, she crawled under the sheets, exhaustion finally winning out. Tomorrow, they would finalize the Redwood deal and then presumably fly back to the city. She told herself that once they returned, everything would go on as normal. But deep in her bones, she suspected normal was no longer possible. Boundaries had been shifted, if not outright crossed. And with each passing day, her resolve to keep things strictly professional was fraying at the edges. Just before she drifted off, she pictured Mr. Drake's expression one more time, the slight furrow of his brow as he studied her, the unspoken question in his eyes. For 5 years, he hadn't allowed anyone close, not even physically. But with every hour they spent together, Elena sensed that door creaking open by the smallest fraction. Whether it was wise or not, she couldn't help feeling drawn to whatever lay behind it. High above, the stars gleamed in the clear redwood sky, oblivious to the turning wheels of commerce and the quieter, more perilous shift in 2 guarded hearts, tucked away in a modest hotel, bracing for the morning's final negotiation and for whatever might come next. Sunlight sliced through the narrow gap of the hotel curtains, rousing Elena from slumber. She blinked, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar room. The events of the previous night came rushing back. The marathon negotiations with Redwood, the standing dinner amid contract disputes, and the final consensus they'd achieved close to midnight. For the moment, they had an uneasy agreement, one that needed official signatures later this morning. After a quick shower, she slipped into a fresh blouse and skirt, smoothing out every wrinkle. This was a big day, one that would hopefully see the Redwood expansion deal locked in. Another triumph for Drake Enterprises, and for her. She thought briefly of her father's insurance crisis, reminding herself that if the Redwood project commenced soon, she'd have job security. Possibly a modest bonus if things truly went well. She secured her hair into a neat twist, aware that Redwood's staff would be examining every detail of her demeanor. A flurry of nerves churned in her belly. She double-checked the contract folder. Extra copies, appended notes. Her phone showed it was 7:30. Enough time to meet Mr. Drake and head back to Redwood HQ, where the final documents would be signed at 9. Just as she slipped her phone into her purse, it buzzed with an incoming call. She almost let it go to voicemail, but noticed her mother's number. A spike of anxiety flared. Why would her mother call so early? Elena quickly answered, stepping close to the window for better reception. Her mother's voice was strained. "Honey, don't panic, but your father had some complications last night. The doctors are running more tests. He's stable, but they want to keep him for additional monitoring. The insurance matter, it's urgent." Elena's stomach twisted. "Is he okay?" she asked, voice trembling. "What do you mean, complications?" He was short of breath. They suspect fluid buildup around his lungs. "He's calm for now, but we can't afford to postpone any more payments. The hospital might limit certain procedures if the insurance lapses." A wave of helpless frustration washed over Elena. She didn't have the money yet. "I'm in Redwood for work," she said shakily. "Negotiations are finishing today. I'm trying. I'll do everything I can. Just hold them off a bit longer." Her mother's tone softened. "I know you are, sweetheart. We'll manage. But please come home as soon as you can." They ended the call, and Elena stood motionless, gazing at the modest city skyline outside her hotel window. Inside her chest, dread warred with resolve. She had to remain professional, see Redwood through. She couldn't break down now, no matter how her heart ached. In a few hours, she could corner Mr. Drake about possibly discussing a salary advance or a specialized bonus arrangement. But even the idea of mixing her family's crisis with her boss's professional sphere felt unnerving. She swallowed hard, squared her shoulders, and exhaled slowly. "You can do this," she told herself. In the corridor, she bumped into Mr. Drake, who was locking his door. He was immaculate as always, wearing a crisp navy suit and an expression of focused efficiency, though faint lines of fatigue traced beneath his eyes. "Morning," he greeted, noticing the tension in her face. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," she lied, forcing a slight smile. She clutched the contract folder. "I'm ready to finalize Redwood." He gave a brief nod. His gaze lingered a second too long, as if sensing her turmoil, but he said nothing further. Moments later, they were in the black sedan provided by Redwood, traveling once again along the industrial roads. The hush inside the vehicle pressed on Elena's nerves, but she occupied herself by reviewing last-minute contract notes. She didn't trust her composure enough to make idle conversation. They arrived at Redwood's administrative offices shortly before 9. The CFO, General Counsel, and Raymond Lynch were already in the conference room, stacks of papers awaiting them. As soon as Mr. Drake and Elena entered, the Redwood team stood exchanging formal greetings. Lynch poured coffee all around, but there was no time wasted. Everyone settled in and pored over the final contract drafts. For the next hour, they hammered out any leftover micro-issues. A line about milestone reporting, a footnote clarifying shipping rates for specialized cargo. Elena swiftly typed changes, printing fresh pages on Redwood's in-house printer. Mr. Drake and Redwood CFO had a tense aside over the language shift from licensing fee to infrastructure support, but ultimately Redwood accepted it. The tension that had hovered like a thundercloud finally cracked, giving way to relief. At a little past 10, the Redwood CFO uncapped a pen and, with a solemn air, scrawled his signature on each of the official copies. Mr. Drake did the same. Elena, standing just behind him, felt her heartbeat speed up. This was it. The Redwood expansion was formally sealed. Applause broke out around the table, Handshakes offered and received. Even Mr. Drake's stern face relaxed slightly, though it was fleeting. Lynch clapped Elena lightly on the shoulder, a casual, thankful gesture that she found momentarily startling. "Nice work," he said, beaming. "Drake told me how crucial your role was. We look forward to implementing these expansions." She managed a polite smile, ignoring the swirl of emotion inside. Did Mr. Drake truly credit her so openly? The idea warmed her, but she reminded herself not to dwell on it. She had bigger issues to handle once she returned to the city. After half an hour of final pleasantries, the Redwood team escorted them to the exit. Mr. Drake confirmed that they had seats on a return flight in the early afternoon, leaving them just enough time to swing by the Redwood facility for a quick site tour. Elena felt exhaustion pressing on her, but she forced a professional smile. She had done it, helped secure another major victory. If she was ever going to approach Mr. Drake about financial assistance, perhaps this success would strengthen her case. They climbed into the sedan once again. The driver started the engine, pulling away from Redwood's administrative building. Elena glanced at her phone. New text messages from her mother and one from her father. She swallowed hard. He was still in the hospital, but apparently stable. She typed a quick reply, promising to call the moment she landed back home. "Everything all right?" Mr. Drake's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned, pulse skittering. She must have looked shaken. Yes. Just a personal matter. My father's not well. He's hospitalized." His expression flickered, concern lacing his otherwise even gaze. "I'm sorry to hear that. Anything serious?" She hesitated. This was more transparency than she'd ever given. But after so many weeks of quiet tension, she found herself unable to lie. "It's complicated. He's had ongoing health issues, and I'm trying to ensure insurance covers his treatments. But finances have been rough. She trailed off, unsure how much to disclose. He studied her profile, eyes narrowed in thought. "Is that why you look so tense lately? Because you're worried about your father's coverage?" Caught off guard, she pressed her lips together. "It's part of it," she finally admitted. "But I'm handling it." His jaw tightened as though stifling an impulse. Then he spoke quietly. "If there's a way I can help, let me know." The directness of his offer made her stomach flip. She wasn't sure if it was a standard line, like a polite, "hope you're doing okay," or if he truly meant it. Yet the sincerity in his eyes halted her short. She fumbled for a poised reply. "I appreciate that, Mr. Drake, truly, but I'll manage on my own for now. Let me see how the next few days unfold." He nodded, not pressing further, and turned to gaze out the window. Silence descended once more, though this time it bristled with unspoken empathy. Elena's chest felt both heavier and lighter all at once. Perhaps she wasn't alone in her struggles after all, yet the idea of mixing her personal desperation with the professional realm left her uneasy. She hated the notion of being seen as someone seeking pity or favoritism. She'd earned her respect here by competence, not by appealing to the CEO's mercy. The Redwood site tour was mercifully brief. A quick drive past the loading docks, a glance at new crane installations, a handshake with the facility manager. By noon, Elena and Mr. Drake were at the small regional airport. They boarded the private jet that had brought them, exchanging polite nods with the crew. This time, Elena felt the exhaustion more acutely than excitement. She sank into her seat near the conference table, letting her eyelids flutter closed for a moment. Mr. Drake settled across from her. They both sipped water as the engines roared into motion. The plane lifted from the runway, climbing into a brilliant midday sky. Once airborne, Elena powered up her laptop, intending to type a summary of Redwood's final terms. But fatigue weighed on her, mind foggy from the near-sleepless night and the tension with her family. "Take a break," Mr. Drake said, noticing her slow keystrokes. His voice was subdued. "We can file the summary tonight." She inhaled to protest, but her body felt like lead. "We're used to pushing hard," she murmured. "But I guess a short rest wouldn't hurt." She saw something like compassion flicker over his features, an unspoken understanding that she'd given every ounce to ensure the Redwood deal's success. With a small nod, she closed the laptop and leaned back, fighting the swirl of thoughts in her head. He resumed reviewing documents on his tablet, leaving her a pocket of quiet. Minutes passed in that hush, the gentle hum of the jet lulling her. She might have dozed, drifting in and out of half-consciousness. A stray memory of her father teaching her to ride a bike as a child surfaced. She had no idea how long she'd been lost in that nostalgic haze when a change in the cabin's pressure roused her. She blinked awake, realizing Mr. Drake was gently draping a folded blanket over her lap. He must have noticed her shivering in the cabin's air conditioning. Surprised, she opened her mouth to speak, but he merely placed a finger to his lips, indicating silence, then returned to his seat. The gesture was so unexpectedly kind it momentarily stole her breath. The hush deepened, words thick with meaning, unspoken. She studied his profile across the aisle. He seemed absorbed in his reading, but his posture was more relaxed, the corners of his mouth softened. She considered thanking him out loud, but sensed that might embarrass him or break the unspoken peace between them. Eventually, she found her heart had slowed, her shoulders easing. She sank deeper into the seat, letting the blanket's warmth and the plane's steady vibrations lull her. A part of her recognized that she was stepping into territory far beyond a simple work relationship. Moments like these, though small, built a bridge of trust that was delicate and real. She wondered if he felt it too. An hour later, the pilot's voice crackled through the speakers, announcing their final descent. Elena roused fully, stowing the blanket. Mr. Drake was meticulously tidying his papers. He glanced at her once, expression inscrutable. She offered a faint smile, which he hesitantly returned. They touched down at the familiar city airport, the same private terminal. The late afternoon sun drenched the tarmac in gold. Once the jet taxied to a stop, they disembarked, stepping back into the swirl of big city energy. A waiting town car whisked them toward Drake Enterprises. Neither of them spoke much. The Redwood contract was done, and presumably they'd part ways until tomorrow's routine. Yet Elena sensed they'd shared something intangible, a deeper trust, an acknowledgement that each carried burdens, personal and professional, with unyielding resolve. At the office, it was nearly 5. The day's normal staff were wrapping up tasks, the top floor bustling with a subdued end-of-day hurry. Elena walked in step with Mr. Drake down the corridor. She would head to her desk, gather her laptop, and finalize a Redwood summary. He'd presumably retreat to his private office. Then they'd head their separate ways. As they passed Danielle's station, Danielle sent Elena a conspiratorial smile. "Welcome back. Heard Redwood was a win." Elena nodded, returning a slight grin. "Yes, all good." Mr. Drake caught the exchange, offered a brisk nod of confirmation, and then addressed Elena. "Once you have that final Redwood summary, email it to me. No rush tonight if you need rest." His gaze flicked downward, momentarily gentle. "But I'll need it by tomorrow morning." Warmth coursed through her. He was extending grace for her exhaustion. She refused to let her voice wobble. "I'll have it done, sir. Thank you." He walked on into his office. Elena stood a moment, letting a wave of relief flow through her. The Redwood ordeal had ended successfully, one more victory to buoy her. But overshadowing her sense of triumph, her father's condition weighed heavy. As soon as she reached her desk, she pulled out her phone to check messages. A text from her mother read, "No major changes. He's stable, but we still need that payment soon." Elena clenched her jaw. She could do this. She'd keep working, keep collecting, build up what she needed. If absolutely necessary, she might accept Mr. Drake's quiet offer of help, though the thought made her uneasy, conjuring images of office gossip turning vicious. She reminded herself she'd gotten this job on her own merits. The Redwood success was proof of her value. Perhaps soon she'd have the leverage to negotiate a raise or a bonus without having to confess her family's crisis outright. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to crumble in the public corridor. She straightened her shoulders and turned to her desk. Redwood might be done, but the next wave of tasks was always on the horizon, and so long as she performed at peak capacity, there was hope. She spent the next hour writing a concise Redwood summary, 2 pages covering final outcomes, expansions, timelines, contingencies. She checked, rechecked, then emailed it to Mr. Drake. The entire office was nearly empty now, lights off in most cubicles. She was about to pack up when an incoming message from Mr. Drake appeared in her inbox. Subject: "Well done, I received the Redwood summary. It's impeccable. Go home and rest, Ms. Turner. We have more to tackle in the coming days." Simple words, but they filled her with an odd warmth. She pushed away from her desk, grabbed her belongings, and shut off the computer. While riding the elevator down, she reminded herself that personal challenges still loomed. But for a moment, she allowed herself to feel proud. She'd navigated Redwood. She'd proven her capabilities yet again. Whatever the rumor mill or the odds of her father's medical crisis, she wouldn't let fear consume her. Outside, the city's early evening sky had softened to lavender. Elena inhaled the cooler air, grateful for a quiet moment. She had done her best, and that would have to be enough, at least for tonight. As she walked toward the subway station, she noticed a sleek black sedan idling near the curb. The window lowered, and Danielle's familiar face peered out. "Need a ride?" Danielle asked with a grin. "Boss left instructions that I could offer you a company driver, seeing as you've worked yourself to the bone." Caught off guard, Elena hesitated. I don't want to impose or break any protocol." Danielle shook her head. "Trust me, it's fine. Mr. Drake insisted. He said you've more than earned it." A surge of gratefulness mingled with trepidation. This was a small gesture, but it carried significance. His discreet way of thanking her, perhaps. She nodded, heart fluttering. "All right, thank you." She climbed into the car, sinking against the leather seat. As the driver pulled into traffic, she let out a long exhale. Though she still faced the chaos of her father's condition, she found solace in the knowledge that she wasn't alone in her burdens. The Redwood success, the subtle kindness Mr. Drake had shown, all of it combined to form a tenuous hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would turn out okay. Yet under that hope lay a quiet realization. The lines between them, boss and employee, were steadily blurring. Whether that spelled redemption or heartbreak, she couldn't yet see. But as the car navigated the city's nightscape, she dared to believe there was still time to shape her future on her own terms, and perhaps even help heal the wounds of a man who hadn't let anyone close for 5 long years. The next morning greeted Elena with a sense of both determination and lingering dread. She was already seated at her desk, coffee cup at hand, long before the majority of Drake Enterprises staff began to trickle in. She had managed a few hours' rest after her emotional evening, coming home in the company car, trying to reassure her mother on the phone, sending a quick text to her father's hospital room. Her father's condition had not worsened overnight, but the insurance situation remained imminent, and the doctors were pressing for decisions about further treatment. She reminded herself that her performance at Redwood gave her a fresh claim to value within the company. Still, the notion of marching into Alexander Drake's office to request a sizable advance felt terrifying. Whether or not he had hinted at wanting to help, Elena feared the potential consequences, professionally and personally. Rumors would explode if it seemed she was receiving special financial favors, and deep down, her pride stung at the idea of relying on anyone else's charity. But that morning, she had little time to nurse her anxieties. The phone on her desk rang persistently with inquiries regarding the Redwood contract. Suppliers, subcontractors, and newly curious media outlets all clamored for details. She navigated each call carefully, scanning Mr. Drake's personal instructions on who should receive an official statement and who should be politely deflected. The Redwood expansion was now the talk of the city's business pages, and Drake Enterprises wanted to shape the narrative with precision. Somewhere in the midst of the bustle, Danielle approached with an envelope. She set it on Elena's desk, expression curious. "This arrived by courier for you personally. No return address." Elena frowned, picking it up. The envelope was plain, sealed with tape. Inside, she found a typed note. No greeting, no signature. "Congratulations on Redwood, Ms. Turner. Your efforts haven't gone unnoticed. But be careful. Cozying up to the boss can be hazardous in more ways than one." Her pulse jerked. She reread the words, a cold knot forming in her chest. That final line dripped with insinuation. It could have been from a resentful colleague or an outsider with too much interest in Drake Enterprises' internal affairs. In either case, the note was a clear warning. She was being watched, and not in a friendly way. "Everything okay?" Danielle asked, seeing Elena's stunned look. Elena slipped the note back into the envelope, forcing a calm facade. "Yes, just some strange message about Redwood, probably a prank." Danielle's brow furrowed. "Should I alert security?" "No," Elena said a bit too quickly. "It's not threatening, just odd. Let's keep it quiet for now." She didn't want to escalate tension or risk overshadowing the Redwood triumph. But inside, her nerves danced, and she resolved to stay alert. Before she could dwell further on the note, Mr. Drake emerged from his office. He wore a charcoal suit today, hair impeccably groomed, exuding command as he surveyed the staff. When his gaze landed on Elena, there was a subtle shift in his expression, something almost warm. Then he motioned for her to follow him into his domain of glass walls and polished surfaces. She tucked the envelope with the note into her desk drawer, rising to accompany him. Inside his office, he closed the door and tapped a folder on his desk. "We're finalizing the official Redwood press release. I need your input on the shipping capacity details to ensure no contradiction with the contract terms." She nodded, stepping closer. "Of course, let me see the draft." He handed her a few printed pages. As she flipped through them, making notes, she felt his eyes on her. An unspoken tension simmered, perhaps the aftershock of Redwood and their recent closeness, or his earlier offer to help with her father's situation. She kept her gaze trained on the text, schooling her features into professional neutrality. "Is everything all right, Ms. Turner?" he asked quietly, echoing the same concern he'd shown in Redwood's sedan. "You seem on edge." Her heart thumped. She considered brushing him off, but the memory of that threatening note intruded. She wondered whether to show it to him. But no, her instincts cautioned. He was already aware she was dealing with personal stress. She didn't want to pile on more drama. Summoning a slight smile, she pretended to focus on the release. "All fine, sir. Just the usual load of tasks." His gaze lingered as if deciding whether to press the issue. Finally, he ceded. "All right. Let me know if you see changes needed in paragraph 2. Redwood is particularly sensitive about disclosing capacity numbers." Elena nodded, scanning the text. They discussed subtle wording changes, the disclaimers about possible expansions in future ports. She scribbled her suggestions, and Mr. Drake quietly agreed with most. Despite the calm exchange, she caught him glancing at her with a mild frown as if noticing her hidden tension. By the time she stepped out, she felt drained all over again. Her father's crisis, the eerie note, and her unresolved feelings about Mr. Drake, everything pressed on her heart like a weight. Around midday, the cafeteria beckoned. Elena grabbed a quick sandwich, though the swirl of anxiety in her stomach made it hard to eat. She spotted a group of employees from accounting, huddled in a corner, throwing looks her way. She tried to ignore them, feigning interest in her phone. Still, she overheard snippets of gossip. "I hear she and the boss traveled alone to Redwood, spent the night in the same hotel." Elena must have found a shortcut to success, if you know what I mean. Heat flared in Elena's cheeks, anger and embarrassment mingling. She'd done nothing improper. Her presence was strictly professional, and Mr. Drake had never crossed a boundary. But rumors apparently thrived on partial truths. She stood, dumped her barely touched sandwich, and left the cafeteria with clenched fists. No wonder that note had arrived, implying she was cozying up to the CEO. Before she could calm her anger, her phone buzzed. It was her mother again, panicked. "They're talking about an additional procedure for your dad. Insurance coverage is uncertain, Elena. We might have to pay out of pocket for part of it or delay. I don't know what to do." Her throat constricted. "Don't let them delay treatment. He needs it." She paused, feeling helpless. "I'll figure out the money, Mom. Just hang in there." Her mother's voice trembled with relief. "Thank you. I'm sorry. I know you have so much on your plate." Elena ended the call, pressing the phone to her forehead. She had to do something. The money required was far more than her savings could handle. She might sell her car, but that wouldn't come close. A raise or bonus from Drake Enterprises would help if she could secure it immediately. Otherwise, God, was she truly prepared to ask Mr. Drake for a personal loan? Her pride rebelled, but her father's life was on the line. She forced slow, even breaths. Perhaps she could approach the company's HR to see if they offered any employee assistance programs, or carefully broach the subject with Mr. Drake, framing it as a request for an advance on her next few paychecks. She wouldn't mention the personal note from Redwood or the malicious envelope. One crisis at a time. Returning to her desk, Elena spent the afternoon tackling smaller tasks. She arranged a flurry of calls, updated schedules, and typed up her Redwood travel expense report. Each ping of her phone made her heart jolt. She braced for more family updates or another anonymous note. But no further messages arrived. Close to 6, as the office began to thin out, she tapped her foot restlessly. She couldn't keep procrastinating. Before she lost her nerve, she rose and knocked on Danielle's station. "Hey, do we have any policy for advance pay in case of emergencies? Like a short-term loan from the company or something similar?" Danielle tilted her head thoughtfully. "I believe HR does have some guidelines for payroll advances, but they're usually modest amounts, and they require manager approval, especially if it's above a certain figure." Elena's heart sank. How big an amount triggers manager approval? "I think anything beyond one pay period's worth." "Why?" Danielle's gaze flickered with concern. Forcing a tiny smile, Elena shrugged. "Just exploring options." "Thanks." She walked away, nerves taut. So if she needed more than a pay period salary, and she did, quite a bit more, she'd need the direct approval of her manager, who, in her unique case, was Alexander Drake himself. She sat at her desk, shoulders rigid. This was it, then. If she wanted help beyond a trivial sum, she would have to approach him personally. Anxiety spiked at the mere thought. Shortly afterward, Mr. Drake emerged from his office, scanning the near-empty floor. He wore a faint frown, as if annoyed by the lateness of the hour. His eyes landed on Elena, who was stiff behind her computer. He approached, voice low. "Still here?" She hesitated, a swirl of fear and necessity in her chest. "Yes, I wanted to discuss something with you, if you have a moment." She forced her voice to remain calm. He nodded. "Come inside." She followed him back into the quiet sanctuary of glass walls. The city lights gleamed outside, dusk having settled. The faint hum of traffic rose from far below. She stood by the leather chair, arms folded protectively, as he took his seat behind the imposing desk. He regarded her with calm curiosity. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Her pulse hammered. She tried to speak, but the words felt stuck in her throat. She looked at him, this stern, powerful man who had glimpsed her personal burdens, yet never once forced his help upon her. And a small voice inside whispered, "He asked you to let him know if you needed anything." She cleared her throat. "It's about my father." He's in the hospital and there are some urgent medical procedures needed that insurance won't fully cover. My family is struggling." She swallowed hard, face warming. "I know it's not standard protocol, but I wanted to ask whether it's possible to get an advance on my salary or a loan from the company. I'd pay it back, of course." A hush fell. Her heart pounded in her ears. She worried he might see her as a liability, someone bringing personal problems into his fortress of business. Or worse, that he'd suspect her of using Redwood's success as leverage. She steeled herself for a reserved refusal, but Mr. Drake's gray eyes flickered with an empathy she seldom saw. He exhaled, leaning forward. "How much do you need?" She froze, mind spinning. She named a figure. It was steep, months of her net pay. Her cheeks burned. "I know it's a lot, but I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical. If you can't—" He lifted a hand, silencing her. "I told you if there was a way I could help. This is something I can authorize. But let's be clear, I don't offer personal loans lightly." Her stomach dropped. Was he about to lecture her? Yet his tone softened. "I'll structure it as a formal employee assistance arrangement with no interest, to be repaid gradually. No hidden strings." Her eyes stung, relief and humility flooding her. Thank you, Mr. Drake. I can't tell you what this means to me. I promise I'll repay every cent." He nodded, pushing aside a few documents on his desk. "I'll draft a brief agreement, or have HR do it discreetly. We'll keep it out of the rumor mill as best we can. Is that acceptable?" She blinked at his consideration. He was protecting her reputation, mindful of the gossip that had already begun swirling. Her throat tightened. "Yes, thank you," she managed. "I appreciate your discretion." For a moment, they simply regarded one another in the glow of the desk lamp. Elena sensed the gravity of what had just transpired, a boundary crossed out of compassion. She was both grateful and uneasy, aware that such a gesture would bind them beyond the ordinary confines of an employer-employee relationship. He rose from his chair, walked around the desk, and stopped a few paces from her. His expression was solemn. "I'm glad to help, but I also expect you to remain as dedicated as you've always been. Our work is about to ramp up further. More expansions, new investments. I'll need you at your best." She swallowed, nodding. "Of course, nothing changes on my end. I'll keep fulfilling my duties." He studied her a moment longer as though weighing invisible scales. Then, the corners of his mouth lifted in a gentle, almost smile. "Good. Let's finalize details tomorrow morning." She let out a shaky breath, stepping toward the door. "Thank you again, sir. This will save my family. I won't forget it." He said nothing more, only gave a soft nod. As she left, the moment hung in the air. A quiet pact. She was relieved yet unsettled by the closeness that inevitably accompanied such support. The man who had spent 5 years shutting women out of his life had, in a single choice, opened a door for her that she'd never expected. It wasn't romance or personal involvement, but it carried an intimacy all its own. Trust, vulnerability, and mutual reliance. That night, Elena returned to her apartment in a haze. She made the phone call to her mother, revealing that funds would soon be available, enough to cover her father's urgent procedures. Her mother broke into relieved tears, promising to pass along the news to her father. Elena's own eyes burned with unshed emotion, the weight of fear lifting just enough for her to breathe again. Afterward, alone in her living room, she paced back and forth. The plain-typed threat left in that envelope echoed in her mind. Be careful. Cozying up to the boss can be hazardous. She recalled the cafeteria gossip, and now she was set to receive a private loan from him. If that ever leaked out, it would feed every rumor tenfold. Yet she also recalled Mr. Drake's gentle empathy, his decision to help without fuss, the quiet moment in Redwood's car when he'd offered support, the blanket on the plane when she slept. She told herself that, for all the speculation, The truth was that he was a decent man whose defenses were starting to slip, and she, desperate, grateful, was stepping into a place of dangerous closeness. The next few weeks could either bolster her career and save her family, or plunge her into a scandal she might not escape unscathed. She turned off her lamp and stood by the window, gazing at the urban skyline. Worries crackled through her mind, but she pushed them aside, letting the memory of his faint smile settle in her heart. Right now, her father's life mattered above all. She would handle the rest as it came. Tomorrow she would sign the official assistance agreement, then fling herself back into the swirling demands of Drake Enterprises. Redwood's success was old news. Fresh expansions and new frontiers awaited. And somewhere in the hush of the nights to come, she might have to contend with the deeper undercurrents that connected her to a man who had vowed never to let anyone get close again. Such vows, she realized, might be tested in ways neither of them foresaw. And for better or worse, she was already committed to seeing it through. Elena arrived at Drake Enterprises before sunrise. Even in the gray stillness of dawn, the city bustled far below the towering glass building, headlights and neon signs flickering in pre-morning darkness. Last night's relief still pulsed through her veins. She had at least one solution for her father's medical bills, thanks to Mr. Drake's discreet assistance. But her mind swirled with the weight of that decision. Accepting his help meant she owed him, and rumors would likely multiply if the arrangement ever came to light. Stepping onto the executive floor, she found it empty except for the faint hum of the air conditioners. She made her way to her desk, turning on a single lamp that cast long shadows against the pristine walls. The hush felt both comforting and ominous. She pressed a hand over the front pocket of her purse, where she had tucked Mr. Drake's preliminary draft for the employee assistance loan, an official but minimal formality that confirmed the terms. All it needed was her signature. A flicker of uncertainty sparked in her. Was she truly ready to cement this arrangement? Pride clawed at her gut, but she forced the thought aside. Her father's health was not a matter of pride. She smoothed the pages, reading again the crisp language. 0 interest, flexible repayment, strict confidentiality. She couldn't have asked for better conditions. Yet the note from yesterday replayed in her memory. Be careful. Cozying up to the boss can be hazardous. The threat felt more tangible now. After a moment, she heard footsteps behind her, soft, measured. She turned to see Alexander Drake himself, wearing a black suit that sharpened his imposing figure. The overhead lights remained dim, so only the glow from the corridor illuminated him, casting half his face in shadow. "You're early," he remarked, setting a thin binder on her desk. "We have an HQ meeting with the legal team about new expansions. But I wanted to finalize the loan paperwork first." She nodded, standing to gather her nerve. "I have it here." She hesitated, meeting his gaze. His gray eyes held a flicker of concern, perhaps reading the swirl of tension in her face. "I appreciate your support, Mr. Drake. This means more than I can say." He pressed his lips together. "I'm only doing what I can. Don't see this as an imposition." His voice was quiet yet firm. "Do you need more time to decide?" Elena inhaled, her mind briefly returning to that typed warning note. But how could she possibly turn down the only viable means to secure her father's treatments? "No," she managed. "I'm ready." With careful hands, she uncapped a pen and signed her name in neat cursive on the final page. She dated it, then stepped back, letting him add his own signature. The hush of the moment felt oddly charged, like they were exchanging a vow unspoken. When he finished, he glanced at her. That intangible tension buzzed in the space between them. She swallowed. "I'll have HR finalize the document and transfer the funds by tomorrow," he said, quietly. She released a tight breath she'd been holding. "Thank you. I'll repay every cent." A taut smile ghosted across his lips. "I know you will." For an instant he seemed to consider saying more, but then he straightened, professional composure snapping back into place. "We should prepare for the 80 meeting. Are the documents ready?" Elena nodded hastily, grabbing the binder from her desk. "Yes, sir. I've compiled projections from Redwood's synergy with these new expansions. It's all cross-referenced." She paused. "Would you like me to brief the legal team on Redwood's final numbers?" He nodded once, firmly. "Yes. You lead that segment." Then, quieter, he added, "Your thoroughness has proved invaluable." Warmth flared in her chest. She gave a slight nod before turning away, her mind whirring. This man, so self-possessed and aloof, kept offering glimpses of a gentler nature. The deeper they ventured into each other's guarded spheres, the more precarious the footing became. The meeting with the legal team began promptly at 8. Elena stood at the head of a polished oak table referencing a projector's slides. Attorneys in dark suits took notes while Mr. Drake sat at the far end, arms folded. The meeting room's view overlooked the city, mid-morning light streaming in. Elena maintained her calm, explaining how Redwood's framework could dovetail with expansions in key port cities. A hint of adrenaline hummed under her words. Public speaking wasn't her favorite, but she'd prepared extensively. When she finished, the head legal counsel, a formidable woman named Karen Howarth, nodded in approval. "Impressive. You've accounted for potential conflicts if we expand shipping capacity abroad. This will save us headaches later." Elena caught Mr. Drake's faint, encouraging nod. Relief coursed through her. Maybe she was truly rising beyond the role of a simple secretary. A subtle sense of pride threaded through her exhaustion. Just as the discussion moved on to trademark concerns, Elena's phone, set to vibrate, buzzed at her hip. She glanced at the caller ID, her mother. Fear prickled. Her father? She couldn't answer in the midst of a meeting, so she silenced it, trying to focus on Karen's questions. But worry coiled in her gut. When the phone buzzed a second time, she pressed her lips tight. They wouldn't call repeatedly unless it was urgent. Sensing her distraction, Mr. Drake rapped his knuckles softly on the table, drawing attention back to the slide. "Ms. Turner, the next point?" She forced a nod, continuing. But inside, dread mounted. She mentally urged the meeting to wrap faster. Finally, after 10 more minutes, Mr. Drake dismissed the group, scheduling a follow-up for the next day. Elena quickly closed the projector, stacking her notes with shaking fingers. The attorneys filtered out. She caught Mr. Drake's quizzical expression, but offered only a hurried half-smile. The moment she was out of the room, she called her mother. "Elena!" her mother answered, voice trembling. "Your father's condition took a turn. He's in a more serious state now. The doctors are preparing an emergency procedure tomorrow morning. They can't wait anymore." A wave of numbness. Tomorrow morning? Then the funds. She realized she wouldn't have them in hand that fast, even if Mr. Drake expedited the transfer. "Mom, I'll see what I can do, please. Just let them do the procedure. I'll handle the costs." "We don't have a choice," her mother said, choking back tears. "He needs it or he could. They said it's critical. I'm so sorry." Elena closed her eyes, voice shaking. "Don't apologize. I'll handle it. I love you both." She ended the call, dread coursing through her limbs. She needed the money immediately, but the official transfer from Drake Enterprises might not process instantly. She could ask Mr. Drake to cut a personal check or arrange a direct wire, but that meant diving even deeper into his personal involvement. Her pride battled with her desperation. She was in too deep to turn back now. Gathering her courage, she hurried to the corridor. She spotted Mr. Drake heading back to his office with a few leftover documents. Summoning resolve, she caught up to him. "Sir," she said quietly, "I'm sorry to bother you, but my father's procedure is happening tomorrow morning. The funds, would there be any way to expedite them?" He halted, scanning her face. She could see empathy flicker over his features. "Of course. I'll see to it immediately. We can process a direct wire from my discretionary account if necessary." Her stomach lurched at the personal nature of that arrangement. But the reality overshadowed any embarrassment. "That would be a lifesaver. Thank you." Her voice caught. "I can't express how grateful I am." He placed a hand on her shoulder, just for a heartbeat, before removing it, almost as though he realized belatedly that physical contact was uncharacteristic for him. But the warmth of his touch lingered, even as he withdrew. "Go to your desk. I'll have instructions for you to sign. Then you're free to leave early if you need to be with your father." Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed in public. "I'll finalize a few tasks first," she managed, voice shaky. "But yes, I might leave early to see him." He nodded. Without another word, he turned and strode into his office. She followed at a short distance, her heart pounding. A swirl of worry for her father mixed with the undeniable awareness that Mr. Drake's compassion was stepping beyond any typical boss-employee dynamic. Within an hour, HR discreetly delivered a short memo and banking form for Elena. She read it, discovered that the funds would appear in her account within 24 hours, less if the bank cooperated. She signed, hands trembling. Danielle, who had been roped into a hush-hush role of delivering the paperwork, gave Elena a concerned glance but asked no prying questions. When it was done, Elena quietly collected her coat. She could barely focus on the Redwood synergy charts that still demanded her attention. She left an email summarizing her morning tasks, promising more updates the next day. Then, with a final exhale, she made her way to the elevator, determined to catch a train to the hospital. Just as the elevator doors slid open, Mr. Drake's voice came from behind. "Ms. Turner." She turned. He stood a few paces away, hands in his pockets, expression sober. "Let me know if you need further support. And keep me informed about your father's condition." She offered a trembling nod. "Yes, sir. I will." The elevator closed, carrying her down. She barely registered the hum of descending floors. Her mind reeled. When had her life become so entangled with that of Alexander Drake, the reclusive, untouchable CEO who, rumor said, hadn't let any woman near him in half a decade? She recalled the gentle hand on her shoulder, the faint traces of concern in his eyes. They lingered, stirring a swirl of emotions she didn't have the energy to sort. At the hospital, beeping machines and antiseptic smells overwhelmed her senses. She found her mother pacing in a cramped waiting area. They embraced, a tangle of relief and worry. Together, they peered into her father's room, where he dozed with oxygen tubes threaded around his face. The man who once taught Elena unwavering perseverance looked so fragile now. "How did you manage the money so fast?" her mother whispered, voice cracking. Elena tensed, feeling the sting of secrets. "I found a way. I'll repay it, don't worry." Her mother nodded, eyes moist. She asked no further questions. With the hospital staff assured that the financial barrier was lifted, the procedure was set to commence the next morning. Elena spent hours by her father's bedside, speaking softly when he woke, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of rest. Each minute that passed hammered home how desperately she'd needed Mr. Drake's help. Late in the evening, after the surgeons confirmed the procedure's schedule, she slipped into the hallway, phone in hand. She owed Mr. Drake an update. It felt strange to stand among hospital staff and patients while texting her formidable CEO, but she typed quickly, "Thank you for the expedited transfer. My father's procedure is confirmed for tomorrow morning. I'll keep you posted. Elena." She hesitated before hitting send, noticing she'd signed it with her first name alone, dropping the Ms. Turner formality, a sign of how the lines continued to blur. With a tremor in her fingers, she pressed send. The response came minutes later, surprising her. "I'm relieved it's moving forward. Focus on your family. The office can wait." She stared at the words, a small wave of gratitude and something else washing through her. She tapped out a short thank you in reply, not trusting herself to say more. If she let emotions swirl in text messages, she might risk crossing lines she couldn't uncross. Early the next morning, she woke in a stiff hospital chair where she dozed intermittently. Nurses bustled in and out, prepping her father for surgery. He was too groggy to speak much, but when he caught her eye, he tried to squeeze her hand, a faint smile playing at his lips. She forced cheer into her voice, promising that everything would be okay. In her heart, she prayed with every ounce of hope she had. At 9 sharp, they wheeled him to the operating room. Elena and her mother sat in the waiting area, silent save for the occasional question from a nurse. Time crawled. She thought of Redwood, expansions, the hush of Mr. Drake's office, the typed note. The world outside the hospital felt distant and unimportant compared to the fragile life on that operating table. After what felt like an eternity, a surgeon appeared in scrubs, mask lowered. He explained the procedure had gone smoothly. Her father was stable, though they'd keep him in intensive care for observation. Relief crashed over Elena, tears slipping down her cheeks as she hugged her mother. She texted Mr. Drake a simple update. Surgery went well. He's stable. She wasn't sure if he'd be in a meeting or on a call, but she wanted him to know. Minutes later, her phone buzzed. Good to hear. Take the day if needed. We'll manage. Drake. Despite the tension of the moment, a soft smile curved on her lips. He'd dropped Mr. and Ms. Turner altogether in that text, too. The subtle shift in their communication felt deeply personal. Her father remained sedated most of that day. By afternoon, the immediate crisis had passed, and the doctors assured them that the initial results were promising. Elena's mother urged her to go home, rest, maybe check on work if she needed. Elena, however, lingered, unwilling to part from her father's side just yet. Around dinner time, she finally ceded and took a taxi home, exhaustion crushing her. Inside her quiet apartment, she breathed in relief. The medical crisis was far from over, but at least a major hurdle had been cleared. She splashed cold water on her face, letting the day's events settle. So much had happened in such a short span: her father's near emergency, the hush of hospital corridors, Mr. Drake's unwavering willingness to help. Everything felt surreal. She changed into comfortable clothes and sank onto the couch, phone in hand. She saw the exchange of texts with Mr. Drake, the last one reading, "Take the day." A pang of guilt gnawed at her. She was the personal assistant after all. The Redwood expansions and new deals wouldn't wait forever. But in that moment, she also understood that her father's life took precedence. For once, even Alexander Drake's demands had bowed to a more human concern. Peering out the window, she recalled the first day she'd stepped into Drake Enterprises. How formidable he'd seemed. The CEO who hadn't touched a woman in years, rumored to be cold as ice. Yet the man who had extended his personal account to save her father hardly matched that reputation. She felt a stir of gratitude and something else, a cautious longing that made her heart twist. She couldn't deny there was a closeness forming, a bond they'd never named but both seemed to sense. A beep signaled a text. Danielle, checking if she needed anything from the office. Elena typed a short, "No, thanks," then set down the phone. For now, she just wanted to breathe and let her numb mind catch up with everything. She'd return to the maelstrom tomorrow. Eventually, she dozed off in mid-evening, unsettled dreams plagued by half-formed images, the typed threat, Redwood's shipping containers, her father's frail smile, and Mr. Drake's gray eyes, flickering with guarded empathy. Even in sleep, she felt the lines of her life tangling tighter. She had crossed into a territory where personal and professional wove together, and soon enough the consequences, good or bad, would become impossible to ignore. Elena spent the night alternating between fitful sleep and jerking awake to check her phone. Each small noise from outside, the hum of passing cars, the creaks of the old pipes in her building, brought a spike of alertness. The swirling haze of relief over her father's stable condition fought with the lingering anxiety of her entanglement at work, the cryptic threat note, and the haunting sense that her life's boundaries were eroding in real time. yet somehow morning arrived, as it always did. She rose from the couch, stiff-limbed, and realized she had missed a batch of messages from Danielle and a couple from colleagues requesting urgent updates on Redwood. She also found a brief email from Mr. Drake. Subject: Priorities. Good morning. I trust your father is recovering. When you're ready, please resume coordinating Redwood follow-ups. Also, a new potential collaboration is on the horizon. I want your involvement early. A. Drake. She reread the message twice, her pulse quickening. Another collaboration? He said he wanted her involvement from the start, an unusual move for a mere secretary. Her chest tightened with a complicated mix of nerves and excitement. Everything about the Redwood project had proven her capabilities, yet the more responsibilities she took on, the deeper she stepped into Mr. Drake's closely held circle, and the more she feared people would talk. By the time she arrived at the office, it was nearly 10. She had texted Danielle that she'd be in late after leaving the hospital, and Danielle had responded with a supportive thumbs up. Elena half expected rumors to have flared, but the top floor buzzed mainly with talk of the Redwood synergy. A recent press release praising Drake Enterprises' brilliant expansions had given everyone a sense of momentum. Any side whispers about Elena must have been drowned out by corporate pride. When she approached her desk, she found a sticky note reading, "Mr. Drake wants to see you as soon as you get in. Danielle." Below that, in Danielle's neat script, "Welcome back. Hope your dad's doing better." Elena allowed herself a small smile. She settled her purse, took a sip from the coffee she'd picked up on the way, and then grabbed her notepad. Time to face her boss, who, whether or not he realized it, held her gratitude in ways she could never fully repay. Inside Mr. Drake's office, the atmosphere was charged as usual, but Elena could sense a strange undercurrent of warmth. He stood behind his desk, scanning a printed document. At her entrance, he glanced up, eyes assessing her, then softened. "Good to see you. How's your father?" She exhaled, keeping her tone steady. "Stable, recovering. The procedure went well. Thank you for asking, and for everything." The emphasis on everything hung in the air. He nodded once, acknowledging the unspoken weight of her gratitude. Then he extended a folder. "We have a new partner sniffing around, an international shipping conglomerate that noticed our Redwood deal. They want to explore a joint venture in ports across Southeast Asia. This is enormous, could dwarf Redwood if it materializes." Her pulse fluttered. She flipped the folder open, scanning the summary. The conglomerate was known for aggressive expansions, often partnering with big players. "What's their angle?" she asked, curiosity piqued. "Do they want a stake in our shipping routes or a formal alliance?" "That's what we need to determine," Mr. Drake said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "They've hinted at merging some global supply lines with ours. But I suspect they also want access to our logistics software. We have an edge in predictive shipping routes that they'd pay heavily to integrate." Elena caught a flicker of excitement in his otherwise reserved eyes. He lived for big deals like this, the challenge of forging alliances that redefined entire markets. She remembered how, at Redwood, he had thrived on the back and forth, even if it exhausted him. "When do we start formal talks?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling. "Their representative, a Mr. Liang, arrives in 2 days. I want us fully briefed before then. I'll need you to gather the relevant data. Redwood's synergy potential plus our global shipping infrastructure details. Get the finance team and IT consultants on board. They'll provide numbers, but I trust you to consolidate everything neatly." She nodded, heart surging with both eagerness and a hint of trepidation. "Understood, sir. I'll get started immediately." "Good," he said, then more softly, "and don't push yourself too hard. You must be worn out from the hospital visits." Her gaze dropped to her notepad. The concern in his voice was genuine, but it reminded her anew of how personal their interactions had become. "Thank you, Mr. Drake," she murmured, voice subdued. "I'll manage." He gave a short nod, stepping aside so she could pass. As she reached the door, he added, If anything changes with your father's condition, don't hesitate to take time off. The company can handle itself." She paused, adrenaline pumping. This was so far from the ice-cold boss she'd expected when she first got the job. She turned, offering a hesitant smile. "I appreciate that. I really do." His lips twitched in what might have been a faint smile. Then he turned back to his work, letting her slip out. From that moment on, the day erupted into full-blown chaos. Elena dove into data collection for the new conglomerate talks, calling IT managers to retrieve software specs, pinging the finance team for up-to-date shipping revenue stats. She juggled Redwood's next steps, coordinating shipments with newly hired staff, while setting up a special shared drive for the potential joint venture. Danielle helped by fielding lesser queries, but Elena found her head spinning with the sheer volume of tasks. At one point, she caught a glimpse of Mr. Drake through his office's glass panels. He was on the phone, gesturing with uncommon animation. She couldn't read his lips, but she suspected he was already in preliminary calls with Mr. Liang's people. They were forging ahead at breakneck speed, typical for Drake Enterprises, where opportunities waited for no one. By mid-afternoon, a swirl of employees began dropping by her desk to casually ask about her Redwood trip and upcoming negotiations. Some were sincere, congratulating her new responsibilities. Others seemed less friendly, eyes lingering on her as if trying to glean secrets. She kept her composure, giving polite, guarded answers. The typed threat from before still loomed large in her memory, warning her to be careful. She had no idea who had sent it, but she felt the prickle of scrutiny every time a co-worker hovered, eyes flicking between her and Mr. Drake's closed office door. Around 4, she realized she hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. Her stomach growled ominously. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, scanning her to-do list. Just a few more urgent calls. "Elena?" Danielle's voice floated over the edge of her cubicle. "You've been going non-stop. Break for 10 minutes at least." She held out a small paper bag. "I grabbed you a sandwich." A wave of gratitude welled. She accepted the bag. "Thank you so much," she said, genuinely relieved. She tore open the sandwich wrapper and took a bite, the savory flavor restoring her frayed nerves. Between mouthfuls, she murmured, "Has Mr. Drake mentioned anything about the new conglomerate besides the basics?" Danielle shook her head. "No, but rumor has it this could be the biggest deal since Redwood. Maybe bigger. If it goes through, it'll cement Drake Enterprises in the top tier of global shipping." She paused, eyes flickering. "And your role in Redwood is definitely a point of pride for him, I hear." Elena swallowed, heart fluttering. "He's a demanding boss," she said carefully. "I'm just doing my job." Danielle gave a small grin. "He's also extremely private, yet he's clearly trusting you with more responsibilities. That says something." Trying not to look flustered, Elena changed the subject, asking about next week's event schedule. Danielle obliged, but her knowing smirk lingered, as if suspecting more than Elena revealed. By the time Danielle left, Elena found her hands trembling slightly. The entire office seemed to notice her accelerated closeness with the CEO, whether or not they knew about the loan. It was only a matter of time before gossip flared in earnest again. The rest of the day blurred. Elena secured final pieces of data, compiled them in a neat digital folder, and emailed Mr. Drake an overview. By 7, the floor had largely emptied, leaving only a handful of late-working staff. Mr. Drake emerged to stand by her desk. "Progress?" he asked, gaze flicking to her screen. She rubbed tired eyes. "I've consolidated everything. Finance numbers, shipping route data, Redwood synergy possibilities, all in this folder." She clicked through it, demonstrating. He nodded, impressed. "Well done. I'll review it tonight. We'll discuss the next step in the morning. Go home and rest." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I plan to." She began to gather her things. but a question burned on her mind, a question of caution. "Sir, about the new joint venture? We'll have to be mindful of Redwood's exclusivity clauses, right? If Redwood suspects we're diverting shipping capacity to another partner, that might cause conflict." His eyes lit with approval. "Yes, exactly. We'll need to negotiate around that. Good catch." He paused, standing close enough for her to catch a faint trace of his cologne. The air seemed to still. "You really have a knack for anticipating issues," he murmured, voice low. "Not many do." Her pulse thudded. She almost told him about the threatening note and her sense of being watched, but fear and pride held her back. Instead, she forced a quiet, "Thank you," shouldering her purse. "I'll see you tomorrow. Good night?" He glanced away, stepping back as if remembering to keep distance. "Good night, Ms. Turner." The formal address returned, reinforcing their professional boundary, even as their bond felt anything but routine. She rode the elevator down alone, mind whirling with the day's frenzy. Outside, the sky had turned a deep navy, the city's lights beginning to glimmer. She inhaled the crisp evening air and decided to walk a few blocks before grabbing public transit. It helped her clear her thoughts. Partway along the sidewalk, she noticed a figure in a dark coat appear on the opposite side of the street, matching her pace for half a block. Her pulse jumped. Was this a coincidence or something sinister? She recalled that malicious note. Cozying up to the boss can be hazardous. Could someone be following her? She deliberately slowed, stepping into the light of a shop window. The figure paused, then turned away, heading down a side street. Probably just a pedestrian, she told herself, trying to quell the paranoia. Still, her heart hammered. Tension coiled in her gut, the sense that something was not right. She arrived home, triple-checking her door's lock. Leaning against the door, she forced her racing heart to settle. Perhaps she was overreacting, reading too much into random city shadows. But the memory of that note refused to fade. She needed to be cautious. Maybe, she resolved, she should quietly alert security at Drake Enterprises about the envelope. Yet, as she sank onto her couch, exhaustion swamped her. Tomorrow brought new challenges, finalizing Redwood's next phase, preparing for Mr. Liang's arrival, ensuring no cracks exposed her father's situation or her secret loan with Mr. Drake. And the intangible closeness she felt with him loomed like a double-edged sword, comforting yet risky. Late that night, she finally slipped into uneasy sleep, dreaming of shipping containers with locks she couldn't open, while a shadowy figure watched from the corner of her vision. Always, that sense of being observed, no matter where she turned. Morning light filtered through the tinted windows on the top floor of Drake Enterprises, illuminating the sleek interior where Elena sat, reviewing her notes on the new potential joint venture. Although she'd slept fitfully, plagued by dreams of looming figures and locked shipping crates, she arrived earlier than usual, determined to polish every detail for Mr. Drake's upcoming negotiations with Mr. Liang. Outside, the city had fully awakened, with the rhythmic whoosh of traffic far below. But inside the executive suite, Elena felt the presence of invisible eyes on her. She glanced around, recalling the uneasy feeling of being followed the night before. The typed threat from days prior still weighed on her mind. Was it a random scare, or did someone truly have designs to undermine her, and maybe even Mr. Drake? She forced her anxieties aside and leaned closer to her computer screen. She had to stay focused. The new shipping conglomerate, based largely in Hong Kong and Singapore, was sending Mr. Liang as an advance envoy. From the files, Elena gleaned that his firm specialized in bridging shipping lines across multiple continents. If an alliance materialized, Drake Enterprises would be catapulted into a global league beyond Redwood's scope, and she, Elena, was at the epicenter of that process. Shortly after 7, the elevator pinged, and footsteps signaled the arrival of Mr. Drake. As always, the air in the corridor seemed to shift. He approached her desk, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes met. She saw relief there, perhaps from hearing her father's surgery had gone smoothly, and also a new intensity, as though the Redwood success had emboldened him to rely on her more than ever. "Ms. Turner," he said in a low voice, setting down a thin folder, "Mr. Liang will be here by 9. I've lined up a preliminary meeting in the smaller conference room. I'd like you present. You'll run the presentation on our logistics software capabilities." She pressed a hand over her chest, a surge of nerves mingling with excitement. "Yes, sir. I've prepared an overview. I'll finalize the slides now." He paused, posture relaxing a fraction. "And how's your father doing?" A faint smile curved her lips. "Better, thank you. The doctors say it'll be a slow recovery, but he's out of immediate danger." His eyes softened. "I'm glad to hear it." Then, with a brief nod, he strode off to his office. Elena exhaled, heart thrumming. Their conversation was so seamless. A professional request melded with a personal check-in. The boundaries they'd once maintained so rigidly had blurred into something neither had quite named. At 9 sharp, the elevator chimed, and Mr. Liang arrived, accompanied by 2 associates. He was a polished figure in a charcoal suit, perhaps in his mid-50s, with a controlled energy that matched Mr. Drake's. After polite introductions in the lobby, Elena guided them to the smaller conference room. She took note of every detail, how Mr. Liang's eyes lingered on the modern decor, how he assessed the building's design with the practiced air of a man who'd seen corporate headquarters around the globe. Mr. Drake greeted them formally, then turned the floor over to Elena for a short presentation. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She glanced around, Mr. Drake at the head of the table, Mr. Liang and his colleagues to one side, half a dozen Drake executives on the other. This was her moment to establish credibility with a brand-new high-stakes partner. She began steadily, voice clear but calm. Projected on the large screen were charts illustrating Redwood's synergy, shipping route expansions, and how Drake's advanced logistics software could integrate with a broader network. Elena had spent the dawn hours refining these slides, and it paid off. Mr. Liang's expression was attentive, and he jotted notes at each crucial data point. When she finished, the room fell silent for a beat. Mr. Liang exchanged looks with his associates. At last, he smiled. "Very impressive," he said, turning to Mr. Drake. "Your Redwood success demonstrates you can scale rapidly, and this software, it might be precisely what we need to unify our routes." "Mr. Drake folded his hands on the table. "We see potential for a strategic alliance, shared shipping lanes, integrated warehousing, a global brand that transcends local limitations, but we have high standards for partnership." His gaze flicked to Elena, almost imperceptibly. "We need to ensure your firm aligns with our culture of precision." Mr. Liang chuckled, a sound of genuine amusement. "I respect your frankness. Let's be equally direct. My firm will want partial ownership of the software patents, or at least a licensing structure that grants operational control." A tense hush followed. Elena felt the intensity in Mr. Drake's posture. She hurriedly interjected, "We can explore a licensing tier that guarantees your company full functional access, while Drake Enterprises retains the core rights. Our Redwood model might serve as a blueprint, though Redwood's arrangement is less global." She pivoted to show a final slide detailing hypothetical licensing structures. Mr. Liang nodded thoughtfully. "That's workable. We'd need further negotiation on revenue splits." Mr. Drake agreed, setting a time for formal talks the next day. They shook hands all around, the atmosphere electric with possibility. The potential alliance was alive, serious, but not final. As Mr. Liang and his associates departed for a guided tour of the facility, Drake's executives murmured excited excitement. Elena found her knees trembling slightly. She'd taken another leap forward, carrying an integral role in a prospective multi-continental pact. She felt more validated than ever, and more visible. An hour later, Elena stepped out to refresh herself with a glass of water. She retreated to a quiet lounge area near the elevator bank, head buzzing with the morning's success. As she sipped, footsteps alerted her that someone else had come in. She turned to see a slender woman from the finance department, eyes darting. The woman gave a tight smile, then stepped closer. "You've certainly climbed fast," the finance staffer said, tone biting. "First Redwood, now front and center with Mr. Liang?" Elena's chest constricted. "I just followed instructions. Mr. Drake assigned me to handle the data. That's all." A scoff. "That's all, sure. Word around the floor is you have the boss wrapped around your finger. Congratulations on Redwood, by the way. I'm sure it's good for your bank account." She gave a knowing smirk. Heat prickled along Elena's neck. "I don't know what you're implying, but I earned my role." A quick shrug. "Of course." The woman left, footsteps echoing. Elena swallowed, shoulders rigid. There it was again. The creeping rumor. She thought of the envelope message, the subtle harassment from some employees. She'd half expected it to die down once Redwood concluded, but apparently not. She returned to her desk, determined not to let her frustration show. Yet inside she felt the toxicity gnaw. She was pinned between public suspicion and the reality of the personal loan she'd accepted. If that detail ever leaked, these whispers might become a roar. The day churned on. Mr. Drake eventually called Elena into his office, requesting a breakdown of Redwood's shipping allocations, so he could show Mr. Liang's team exactly how a scaled integration might look. As she stood beside him, pointing out figures on her tablet, she couldn't help noticing the tension in his jaw. When they finished, he turned to face her fully. "I've heard some comments," he said bluntly. "Office chatter, unfounded speculation that you're exploiting your position." Her stomach twisted. She swallowed. "I'm aware. It's not new, but it's been intensifying." His expression hardened, a flicker of anger in his gray eyes. "I won't tolerate a toxic environment in my company. If you know who's responsible—" She shook her head. "I'm not certain. It could be a small group. I found an anonymous note once, but I haven't identified the sender." She paused, deciding to reveal it. "It basically warned me to be careful about getting close to you." Silence. His face tightened with disapproval. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her cheeks burned. "I didn't want to escalate things, and I thought it might be an isolated message. I didn't want you to think I was stirring drama or using Redwood's success as a shield." He exhaled. "That's ridiculous. You should have informed me. Anonymous threats are unacceptable, no matter how petty." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "We'll alert HR and security. They can monitor suspicious activity." A wave of relief and fear washed over her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "but please keep it discreet. I don't want to become a bigger target." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We'll handle it with discretion." Softening, he added, "I'm sorry you've had to endure that. After everything you've done for the company and for me personally, you don't deserve this." Emotion welled in her chest. She mustered a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Drake." Again, that intangible hush settled. Neither moved. Then, with a visible effort, he cleared his throat and turned back to the spreadsheets. "We'll finalize these route projections by tomorrow. I'll see Mr. Liang again in 2 days to refine terms. Make sure your team has a robust draft ready." Elena nodded, stepping out with a swirl of conflicting emotions. Part of her felt safer now that he was taking her concerns seriously. Yet the more he stepped in to protect her, the more the rumors might intensify. She told herself that work was her anchor. Focusing on the next steps would keep her afloat. Late in the afternoon, after hours of phone calls and data consolidation, Elena's phone buzzed. She glanced down to see an unknown number. Hesitation pricked her spine. Could it be another anonymous message? Steadying her breath, she answered in a low voice. Heavy static crackled. Then a distorted voice said, You think you're untouchable now, Ms. Turner, tucked under Drake's wing? Watch yourself. Not all expansions end well. The line clicked dead. Heart pounding, she lowered the phone. This was more direct and chilling than the previous note. Her mind raced. Who had that kind of grudge? A competitor? A resentful colleague? The Redwood CFO who disliked her? She didn't know. All she knew was that the threat had escalated from a typed note to a call. She rose, scanning the near-empty floor. It was close to 6 again. Just as she considered rushing to Mr. Drake's office, Danielle appeared at her desk with urgent expressions. Elena, security just flagged suspicious individuals on the floor below. They asked if you've seen anything unusual. A jolt of fear, she forced composure. I got a strange call. Threatening, actually. She recounted the gist. Danielle's eyes widened with alarm. We'll get you down to security. They need your statement, Danielle insisted. She waved, and a uniformed guard approached from the elevator bank. Elena's pulse hammered. She was being pulled into the very confrontation she'd tried to avoid. But maybe it was time. She followed the guard to a small security office near the building's side corridor. There, a stern-faced officer took notes on the call, the typed envelope, and the suspicious behavior Elena had noticed. They promised to check phone logs and intensify floor surveillance. If you see or sense anything else, report it immediately, the guard said. Elena nodded, wrung out. She parted ways with the security team, returning to find the executive floor almost deserted. Mr. Drake's office lights remained on, and she realized with a pang that she should update him. She gathered her courage, knocked softly, and entered. He stood by his desk, phone in hand, tension rippling through him. Security told me about the call, he said before she could speak. Are you all right? She swallowed, stepping closer. Just shaken. I don't know who's behind this. His gaze hardened. Whoever it is, they won't get away with it. I've already instructed top-level security. We're checking call records, analyzing visitor logs. He exhaled, scrubbing a hand across his jaw. This is beyond petty gossip. It's harassment. Possibly attempted sabotage of the company's negotiations, too. Elena's eyes flickered with alarm. You think they might try to sabotage the deal with Mr. Liang? He nodded grimly. Competitors sometimes resort to intimidation or infiltration. We have enemies who'd love to undermine our expansions. They might think attacking you, my most trusted coordinator, could destabilize these deals. His tone went quiet. I won't let that happen. Heat rose in her cheeks, a mix of fear and a strange gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Drake, she managed, voice trembling. He stepped around the desk, pausing just a breath away. She could feel the subtle tension in the air. For an instant, she thought he might lay a reassuring hand on her shoulder like he had once before, but he caught himself, fists clenching at his sides. Still, the intensity in his gaze told her he cared more than his carefully measured distance revealed. He swallowed. I know my boundaries, Elena. But I also realize how important you've become here. To the company. He broke off, glancing away. I won't allow you to be harmed. Her heart pounded, reading the subtext in his words. I appreciate that, she whispered. All of it. For a few seconds they stood in a fragile silence. Then he retreated, retreating behind professional composure. Finish up. Let security escort you home. I'll be in contact if anything new surfaces overnight. She dipped her head in acknowledgement. All right. Good night, sir. As she exited, the energy in the room crackled, words unsaid, connections unacknowledged. If the phone threats continued, events might escalate further, forcing them to confront the lines they'd tiptoed around for weeks. That night, Elena complied with Mr. Drake's suggestion. She accepted a security escort to her apartment. Though she hated feeling so vulnerable, a sense of relief washed over her when the guard saw her safely inside. She double-locked the door and settled into the darkness of her living room, every muscle tense from the day's revelations. Dropping onto the couch, she stared at the faint city lights outside the window. She recapped the day in her mind, the successful presentation to Mr. Liang, the intensifying threats, the emotional honesty in Mr. Drake's eyes when he vowed to protect her. The swirl of emotions felt too big to parse in a single night. She texted her mother, relieved to hear her father was making steady progress. The medical bills were managed for now, thanks to that secret arrangement. Her phone sat silent. No new messages from the unknown number. She refused to let fear dominate her. If someone wanted to rattle her, they had succeeded. But she wouldn't cower. Not when the Redwood deal had proven her worth, not when she had her father to look after, and certainly not when Alexander Drake believed in her so strongly. At last, she let her head rest against the cushion, eyelids drooping. Despite the day's tension, a flicker of warmth glowed in her chest. The man who had once sealed himself away from every possible personal connection was stepping closer to her. They now shared more than a professional bond, and though she didn't know exactly where it would lead or how safe it might be, she was no longer certain she wanted to hold those walls in place. Eventually, she drifted into a restless sleep, lulled by the city's distant hum. Tomorrow, she would face a new day at Drake Enterprises, pressing forward with the expansions. The storm of suspicion and sabotage loomed, but in that final moment before sleep claimed her, one truth pulsed in her mind. She wasn't alone. A CEO who had spurned every hint of companionship for 5 years had, in an unspoken, halting way, let her into his guarded life, and she, despite everything, felt ready to match his steps, no matter the cost. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.